If I can have everybody's attention, please. I'd like to thank everybody who attended our meeting tonight. I want to recognize our media and broadcasting partners for reporting on and broadcasting our meeting. Madam Clerk, if you can please begin the meeting.
Under Agenda Item 1, Adoption of Minutes, a motion by Councillors Gardy and Vezo-Allen resolved that the minutes of regular council meeting of August 12, 2019 be approved.
All in favor? Carried.
Under Agenda Item 3, Declaration of Pecuniary Interest, Councillor Shoemaker has declared a conflict with respect to the item definition of heavy equipment, zoning bylaw 2005-150, as both parties are clients of his law firm. And Councillor Hilsinger has declared conflicts on the same, as her father is the proprietor of the Water Tower Inn.
Any other conflicts to be declared, Council? Seeing none?
Under Agenda Item 4, a motion by Councillor Scott and Vezo-Allen resolved that the agenda for September 9, 2019 City Council meeting as presented be approved.
All in favor? Carried.
I'm waiting for a couple, but I'll just do them in the affirmative, I think.
So, Council, we are on our digital voting again, so if you can be mindful of your, it's not coming up, Councilor Nero? Okay. So I assume everybody approves the agenda, so the clerk will add that in, and we'll proceed.
Okay. Under Agenda Item 5.1, Veterans Week, Tina Thomason and Carrie Gray, the Veteran Family Program Coordinators, North Bay Military Family Resource Center, are in attendance.
Yeah, welcome to Council. Do you have anything you wanted to say before I read the proclamation?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, please attend the microphone.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of council, member of the general public, for your time this evening. We're going to rush through this. I know we don't have a lot of time. We do have a video that we want to show you, but before we do that, I just want to acknowledge the presence of several veterans from Sault Ste. Marie that we have in attendance this evening, so thank you for your service. And we have a video to show.
The second tour was when he got injured. It's devastating. All your dreams, your goals, everything is gone. It's just it's like you got to start all over again. It's a struggle. She basically goes through worry, like if she's going to go home and if he's still going to even be around.
I was diagnosed with osteosarcoma in my spine, so I underwent a 25-hour surgery over 2 days to completely remove 3 vertebrae out of my neck.
I didn't want to get out medically, so I voluntarily released, and because I wanted to continue to serve, and moved to Sault Ste. Marie, to where I joined the reserves there until I was eventually medically released after 32 years of service.
I've watched him suffer silently a lot also, knowing that he wasn't there anymore. I felt like a part of
him. As a military family member, to support your spouse who's in the military.
I was very angry of what happened to me, and unfortunately, my ex, she had a large impact on the family.
Everything for me outside of the military was scary. And I had a lot of fears of what do I do now? So the feeling of helplessness was the biggest challenge.
I had a lot of mental health issues that were brewing because of my medical condition, which I didn't deal with because, again, you're taught in the military to push on. I just kept bearing it. And it took a while for me to finally decide that I need to get myself healthy.
You don't give up, and then the rest is just the support that's out there for them.
Being diagnosed with PTSD led me into wanting to help with mental health. And a door opened where, through OSIS, led me to Tina.
The Veteran Family Program is here to help families with their transition to civilian life.
It has grown from 7 pilot sites to all 32 MFRCs across Canada.
I've had the pleasure of meeting families across northeastern Ontario, helping them navigate the system and connect with services they need and deserve.
Becomes a family thing, and then a family thing becomes a community thing, and then a community thing becomes larger.
The Military Family Resource Centre provides a suite of programs and services for releasing regular force and reserve force members, veterans and families who live in communities across northeastern Ontario.
It's really important for veterans and their families to know that we're here for them, that they're not alone.
I get emotional right now because she's come such a long way. Through the families getting together and sharing their stories, that we'll all find solutions and find our ways through this and celebrate together.
Actually, I could probably get down on my knees and thank them. That's how much I got out of meeting them.
And now he's a force to be reckoned with, and I have a whole new brother.
Your community appreciates you.
Thank you, veteran families.
So hopefully that video communicates the key messages we want to leave with you about this special population. Your Worship, we want to thank you for your continued support of the Veteran Family Program and of this community here in Sault Ste. Marie. So thank you all very much. And to mark the occasion, we actually have a special guest here, Sherry Culling from the Legion Service Bureau, who would like to present you with a little token for appreciation.
Did you want to present me with something?
Yes, I do.
Did you want to speak first, or do you want to come up here and do that?
Okay, I just wanted to let you know that I'm up here on behalf of Mr. Bowman from Elliott Lake. His son is autistic. Mr. Bowman is a retired military person. His son has autistic. He's in his 40s, but he makes walking sticks for veterans and special people, and they asked me to give you one.
That's very kind. Why don't we come up here and you do that today?
Thank you very much.
So I have a proclamation to read here. Whereas the transition from military to civilian life following release from the Canadian Armed Forces to veteran status can pose challenges for veterans and for their families. And whereas the family is widely recognized as a strength behind the uniform, and the family often bears the brunt of navigating, connecting, supporting, and learning about civilian life, often at the expense of their own well-being. And whereas the inclusion of veteran families into the social fabric of our community is fundamentally the right thing to do, and whereas it is vital to continue working together to ensure no veteran family is left to walk the journey to civilian life alone. Now, therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim the week of September 8th to September 14th, 2019 as Veteran Family Week in Sault Ste. Marie, as a means to promote awareness of the important role veteran families have, the value they bring to our communities, and I encourage the community to learn about, connect with, and express gratitude for our veteran families in Sault Ste. Marie. Thank you very much to our veterans, their families, and all the work that you do on their behalf.
Agenda item 5.2, Legion Week. Helen Stewart, President of the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 25, is in attendance.
Welcome to Council.
Thank you very much. Your Worship, Mayor Provenzano and all councillors, Legion Week is held the third week in September, commencing Saturday and ending the following Sunday. This opportunity highlights the Legion's commitment to community service and give us another chance to honor and thank veterans. But the Legion is much more than that. Our mandate is to support and honor veterans and their families, as well as supporting senior and youth programs. We support hundreds of medical care projects at the same time responding to emergency requests from veterans. In many communities, the Legion is a social hub providing a place to gather for music, sports, and comradeship. It is our hope that we can inspire others to remember, to honor veterans and their families, and engage in supporting their community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I have a proclamation here to read for you. Whereas the Ontario Provincial Command of the Royal Canadian Legion represents 9 districts, which includes 398 branches, and within these branches there are about 100,000 members. And whereas the Legion is a nonprofit organization assuming the responsibility of maintaining the tradition of remembrance of those who paid the supreme sacrifice by defending our great nation in past and present conflicts, so that we as Canadians can live in the freedom that we enjoy today. And whereas the Legion continues to support and represent our veterans of past and present with many benefits as a result of the determination of our thousands of dedicated members at all levels of the organization. And Legion branches across the province work together with their affiliated organizations, the Ladies Auxiliary, to raise funds in support of the many programs within Ontario Command of the Royal Canadian Legion. Whereas with millions of dollars being raised from branches and Ladies Auxiliary projects, the Legion supports numerous programs benefiting our veterans, seniors, and youth within our communities. Now therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim the week of September 15th to September 21st, 2019, as Legion Week within Ontario Command of the Royal Canadian Legion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Agenda item 5.3, Ovarian Cancer Awareness Month. Gail Manley of the Zonta Club is in attendance.
Welcome to Council, Ms. Manley.
Well, Mrs. Manley is not speaking this evening. It
there.
would be myself. My name is Jane Vino, and I am the chair of the Ovarian Cancer Awareness Committee for the Zonta Club of Sault Ste. Marie area.
Well, welcome to Council, Ms. Vino.
Thank you. Mayor Provenzano, city councilors, city staff, and other guests, the Zonta Club of Sault Ste. Marie area would like to thank you for this opportunity to address everyone about our September campaign to heighten awareness in our community about ovarian cancer. As you may know, we have been spreading the word about this fatal disease in our community for the last 6 years. Every September, Queen Street is adorned with teal ribbons and signs about Ovarian Cancer Awareness Month, encouraging people to wear teal with zeal. We have done presentations called Knowledge is Power in the community, flown the Ovarian Cancer Awareness flag at City Hall. We have distributed posters, ribbons, and brochures in a number of venues. We have used the media to spread our message of awareness through Shaw TV, On TV, Facebook, and other social media. And for the last 4 years, we have hosted an event in September called Purses, Pies, and Pinot. This is a fundraiser where proceeds go to both Zonta Service Projects and Ovarian Cancer Canada. We are proud to announce that to date we have raised almost $24,000 for Ovarian Cancer Canada. And every year we have come to this council chamber to ask for your support in proclaiming September as Ovarian Cancer Awareness Month in our community. Ovarian cancer is the most fatal women's cancer, yet it is often overlooked and underdiagnosed. Symptoms are vague, so most women are diagnosed in late stages where 70% will not survive 5 years. Approximately 1 in 4 Canadian women still believe that a Pap test screens for ovarian cancer, and it does not. A Pap test screens for cervical cancer. Recognizing persistent symptoms and seeing a doctor is currently your best chance for early detection and survival. Did you know that 1 in 2 women who are diagnosed with ovarian cancer will die within 5 years? Survival rates for this disease have not improved in 5 decades, and very few treatment options have been introduced since the 1990s. Scientific progress is needed. In March of this year, the Canadian government announced $10 million for ovarian cancer research. This commitment is the culmination of years of hard work and advocacy by Ovarian Cancer Canada. Research is key and the only way to make progress against this disease. Some of the world's most innovative and engaged ovarian cancer researchers are based here in Canada, and with this funding, we can advance understanding of this disease and help women to live fuller, better, and longer lives. The most common symptoms of ovarian cancer include bloating, pelvic and abdominal pain, difficulty in eating or feeling full quickly, or urinary symptoms of urgency and frequency. Ovarian Cancer Canada recommends that you see your family doctor if you have one or more of these symptoms and they last longer than 3 weeks. Take a look at the fact sheet that we have available or check at www.ovariancanada.org for more information. Everyone who is here this evening can be part of this Zonta campaign by wearing teal and talking teal. It's all about spreading the word about the symptoms and about advocating for oneself. Many of us in the club are committed to this issue because of the loss of a loved one, and as time passes, we can put names to those who have died of ovarian cancer. Margaret, Julie, Laura, Lori, and Susan. Their memories inspire us, and now we campaign for our mothers, our daughters, our sisters, and our friends. Thank you for your support in declaring September Ovarian Cancer Awareness Month in Sault Ste. Marie.
Thank you. So I will get to doing that. Whereas the mandate of Zonta International is to advance the status of women through service and advocacy, and the Zonta Club of Sault Ste. Marie advocates for women's health through local service projects, in particular the Ovarian Cancer Awareness Campaign. Ovarian Cancer Canada strives to increase awareness of this disease, provide women with care, and supports research to change the outcomes for those living with the disease. Whereas the Zonta Club asks the community to join them in learning about one of the most deadly cancers among women. Now therefore I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim the month of September 29 as Ovarian Cancer Awareness Month, and urge all citizens to share this information about this often overlooked and underdiagnosed cancer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Agenda item 5.4, Childhood Cancer Awareness Week. Selena Campione and Aaron Campione, Northern Ontario Families of Children with Cancer, are in attendance.
We've got some folks out here in the hallway here. There's room in the gallery if you'd like to come in and join us. I recognize the Katzenbach family and the Fowler family, if you want to just give them a minute to come in.
September is Childhood Awareness Month, and our color is gold. We set our profile pictures and status updates with its solidarity, driven to highlight the tiny warriors in our lives, the survivors, and those still fighting, and the dear ones that we've lost. The stories vary from child to child, family to family, connecting us from the moment it all begins. Northern Ontario Family of Children with Cancer is hosting this event here this year, and it asked us, the Campione family, to represent as we have lost a family member to child cancer. The NOFCC supports families all over the north, and with their immediate financial and emotional needs become, unfortunately, families in our area region are forced to travel for treatment in Ottawa, Toronto, London, and even to the States and beyond. The large amount of income that is lost during treatment is very overwhelming for a young family. The NOFCC tries to reduce the burden that many face and allow those parents to concentrate on their child and make the necessary treatment decisions without having to worry about the costs involved. The NOFCC also funds multitude of programs designed to assist them with the challenges they face years to come. The charity offers 23 programs, such as financial assistance, reimbursement programs for parking, taxi, accommodation, emergency fund, medication coverage, palliative support service, counseling, tutoring, and more. And so much more that the families battling cancer, childhood cancer, and beyond. If you're not familiar with their work of helping families, I do invite you to visit their website to learn more about it. This year, they're celebrating their 20-year anniversary of services in the North. The reality is, for most families, it is that as the cost increases, income decreases, and cancer becomes the focus of the family. It is estimated that 1/3 of families' after-tax income is lost after diagnosis due to out-of-pocket treatment related to expenses. The Canadian Cancer Action Network estimates that families of children with cancer endure an average of more than $28,000 in costs in the first 3 months of treatment being diagnosed. Every 2 minutes, a parent somewhere in the world hears the word, "Your child has cancer." Sadly, more northern children develop cancer than anywhere else in the province. The Ontario average is 150 cases per million children. In the Northeast, it's 175 cases per million. The rate of new cases of cancer in children under the age 15 increases over the last 3 decades in Ontario. It is most common in children between 0 and 4, while childhood cancer has been increasing. The rate of lung and prostate cancers, which is also never diagnosed in children, is decreasing. Cancer in children also tends to be aggressive, grows more rapidly, and more likely to spread to other areas of the body. Childhood cancer is considered rare, although in Canada, 1 in 285 children will be diagnosed by the time they reach their 20th birthday. 1 in 5 will succumb to cancer. There are currently 10,000 children with cancer in Canada, and around the world, 300,000 children are diagnosed every year. And again, every 2 minutes, a child is diagnosed around the world. Every 6 minutes, one is diagnosed right here in Canada. Every day, about 250 children die from the disease. More children succumb to childhood cancer than any other disease, more than AIDS, asthma, and diabetes combined. This incidence of invasive childhood cancer has increased about 29% over the last 20 years, and 80% of children's cancer have already spread to other areas of the body before it's diagnosed. The case of childhood cancer are still largely unknown, and there is nearly nothing that can be done to prevent the disease. Despite advances in research, 2/3 of children who survive cancer will live with permanent side effects. I ask you now, does that sound rare? We have brought gold awareness ribbons today in hopes that you will take one, wear it proudly through the month of September and beyond. Put a big gold ribbon on your door or spotlight of your house. Get your workplace to do something to recognize the month at your work or business, to collect donations for your favorite charity or donate to research. Have a gold day. There are opportunities to do this on social media, share posts, change your profile picture to gold, participate in events supporting and promoting the cause to support children and families and the ones that look for cures. Actively show your support, your local initiative like the NEO Children's Center, local cancer care programs, and community programs that support families like the NOFCC. For the families, I encourage you to share your stories. Tell people what you have experienced. Contribute to the data that is being collected. Use your voice and your experience to inspire the change. For everyone else, join a board where you can make a difference. Give blood, because it takes 8 units a week to help a leukemia patient, 2 units a day to help someone undergoing bone marrow transplant. And only 4% are blood donors, 4% of people. Do your research when it comes to charities that claim to do things for your community or nationality. Make sure your contributing is well spent by designing it in certain areas of sports or research instead of general donations that get pooled to support other programs that are already well funded. Make sure you know that your charity spends your money so that you can decide whether you want to support it as they run. As it stands, childhood cancer receives only 5% of all cancer research funding in Canada today. Thank you. I'd like to thank the City of Sault Ste. Marie for raising the flag last week and for truly listening to our call for actions and granting us the opportunity to be here this year and have our cause heard. Let the city shine in gold to honor our children and battle each other as they have fought.
Before I read the proclamation, I first raised this flag in 2015, and at the time, I raised it with the Campione family, and Selena is here with us tonight, and I know you were supposed to speak, and I'm sorry that you weren't able to, and it's completely understandable. When we raised the flag this year, we had more families that were with us. We had the Fowler family, and Katzenbach family, and we read a number of proclamations this year, one for Henry Michael Size at his family's request, and another at the Fowler family's request. So we need to be mindful that this is a real significant reality in our community, and that we're seeing it sadly annually. And we come together, though, every year to share with each other and to support each other. And I encourage all the people that can to come out next year and support the families in our community that are struggling with really what is nothing less than an indescribable loss. Whereas there are 4,000 children living with cancer in Ontario, and each year about 400 new cases are diagnosed. And whereas the causes of cancer in children is largely unknown. And whereas in Canada, childhood cancer remains responsible for more deaths from 1 year through adolescence than any other disease, killing 1 in 5 children affected by this disease. And whereas an estimated 1/3 of a family's after-tax income is spent on treatment-related expenses due to a lack of available treatment options for the inhabitants of Northern Ontario. And whereas the City of Sault Ste. Marie recognizes the devastating effects of childhood cancer on the residents of our community. And this month we pay tribute to the healthcare professionals, researchers, private philanthropies, parent advocacy groups who collaborate to provide hope and help to patients and families affected by pediatric cancer, while making vital contributions to the ongoing search for a cure. Now therefore I, Christian Provenzano, Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim September 2019 as Childhood Cancer Awareness Month in the City of Sault Ste. Marie, and encourage residents to show their support of this cause by increasing awareness, speaking up about childhood cancer, wearing the color gold, and reaffirming our commitment to fighting childhood cancer. Thank you.
Agenda item 5.5, a fetal alcohol spectrum disorder awareness. Donna Caputo with the Algoma Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder Committee is in attendance.
Good afternoon, Mayor Provenzano, City Councilors, City staff, and other guests. My name is Donna Caputo.
I'm Sherry Beaton.
And we are both representing the Algoma FASD Committee, which consists of community members and professionals committed to preventing FASD and to supporting those who have FASD. So fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, known as FASD, is a diagnostic term that describes the range of lifelong behavioral, physical, cognitive, and sensory disabilities that can occur in an individual who is prenatally exposed to alcohol. Alcohol use during pregnancy is an established cause of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Alcohol readily crosses the placenta and interferes with the structure and function of developing brain cells. The damage that occurs to the brain depends on the amount, the pattern, the timing of use of the alcohol use in pregnancy, which is why no two people will have the same physical and developmental challenges. Therefore, there is no safe time, there's no safe kind, and there's no safe amount that is known to be safe to consume during pregnancy. While not everyone who has been prenatally exposed to alcohol will go on to develop fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, FASD has been recognized as the leading known preventable birth defect and cause of developmental delay among Canadians, affecting close to 4% of the population. That's about 3,000 people in a population of 75,000, just like we here in Sault Ste. Marie. FASD is 2.5 times more common than autism spectrum disorder. The symptoms of FASD are complex and may not manifest until school age or beyond. And FASD is often called the invisible disability because individuals with FASD often have difficulties with planning, organization, memory, verbal and written comprehension, and impaired balance and coordination. These challenges put them at increased risk for mental health and addiction, as well as difficulties with school, employment, and social situations, and inability to live independently. However, with proper supports in place throughout the lifespan, those with FASD can lead productive and successful lives. While not, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada also calls upon governments to address and prevent FASD in collaboration with Indigenous people and to undertake reforms in the criminal justice system to better address the needs of offenders with FASD. September 9th, 2019 marks the 20th anniversary of International FASD Awareness Day, where on the 9th day of the 9th month, we recognize the importance of abstaining from alcohol for the 9 months of pregnancy. Thank you.
Whereas alcohol use during pregnancy can cause changes to the structure and function of the developing brain and result in fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and about 4% of Canadians have fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Whereas brain changes caused by prenatal alcohol exposure may result in lifelong physical, cognitive, and behavioral challenges for the individual. Whereas to reduce the incidence of FASD, people planning a pregnancy or those currently pregnant require education about the effects of prenatal alcohol exposure on the developing baby. And whereas the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls upon the federal, provincial, and territory governments to recognize as a high priority the need to address and prevent fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and to develop in collaboration with Aboriginal people FASD prevention programs that can be delivered in a culturally appropriate manner. Whereas to improve the health and well-being of all people who have FASD throughout the lifespan and across all sectors of the community are necessary. Therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim September 9th, 2019 as International Fetal Alcohol Disorder Awareness Day in the City of Sault Ste. Marie. I further encourage residents to act with compassion and understanding to those whose lives have been affected by prenatal alcohol exposure.
Thank you.
Under Agenda Item 5.6, Hispanic Heritage Month, Sandra Mongi of the Spanish Club of Sault Ste. Marie is in attendance.
Welcome to Council, Sandra.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, councillors, thank you. This is Sandra Mongi and
Sherry Tuck, thanks.
We are from the Northern Ontario Latin Hispanic Association in Sault Ste. Marie. And our association is a non-profit organization dedicated to promote and celebrate Hispanic and Latin culture and heritage. We strive to enhance cultural awareness and enrich our community, sharing culture and provided experiences through the exposure of diverse educational, cultural, and artistic events to further the understanding of our Hispanic Latin culture. Ontario is home to more than 400,000 first, second, and third generation of Canadians of Hispanic and Latin origin. As early as 1914, Canadians who originate from the 23 Hispanic countries began immigrants to the province, and today the Hispanic community is one of the fastest growing in Ontario. In fact, in 2011, almost 900,000 people declared Spanish as their native language and reported Latin, Brazilian, and Spanish origins. This year, NOLA, Northern Ontario Latin Hispanic Association, is in partnership with Great Lakes Honda, TD Bank, Algoma University, and Sioux College, we'd like to invite all the community of Sault Ste. Marie to join us to celebrate the first Gala Latina fundraising celebration for our Hispanic Latino Heritage Month in Canada. The celebration Gala Latina dinner will be held on Saturday, September 28th from 5 p.m. until 11 p.m. at Delta Hotel. The celebration will feature culture performers, support by live performance, Cuban music and culture band Los Barbudos, keynote speakers, salsa dance performers, and salsa dance demonstration class, Brazilian artists, and fiesta. Gala Latina is an evening where the Latin American community and Hispanic gathers to celebrate the signs, sounds, and tastes of Latin Hispanic culture. Join us and enjoy this evening. NOLA, the Gala Latina, on September 28, 2019, will attract all people for an unforgettable evening of Latin Hispanic culture. The proceeds will go towards the formal and legal establishment of our association in Sault Ste. Marie to continue supporting our community programs. We offer free Spanish club classes for adults and children in partnership with the library. We also would like to offer Spanish language translation services, organizing, sponsoring, and hosting events, festivals, workshops to promote awareness and understanding of Latin and Hispanic culture and retain our Latin Hispanic immigrants in Northern Ontario and in this community. Latin Americans and Hispanic community in Canada have been made significant contributions to the social, economic, and political fabric of this nation. September, October is Hispanic Heritage Month in Canada, and during this national month, we would like to recognize the contributions, celebrate, and learn more many achievements and contributions to all Latin and Hispanic people in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a proclamation. Before I get to that, we'll repeat September 26th.
28th.
September
Saturday.
28th. So September 28th is the Gala Latina.
Yes, sir.
So it sounds like a lot of fun. And where do people go if they want to get tickets?
The tickets are on sale in eventbrite.ca, or people can, it's an email, and I think in the media have been is nolacan@gmail.com.
So Eventbrite.
Or TD Canada Trust, also the station tower.
Okay.
They can purchase tickets.
Eventbrite or email at nola.
Like Canada
@gmail.com.
Yes, thank you.
So on October 26, 2016, the House of Commons officially recognized October as Hispanic Heritage Month. Whereas on June 20th, 2018, the House of Commons officially recognized Latin American Heritage Month under Bill S-218. Whereas the Hispanic community in Canada was established by a few thousand Spanish immigrants in 1914, the first significant surge in immigration came during the 1970s, during a time of great socioeconomic and political turbulence across Spanish-speaking countries. The Hispanic community has recently grown significantly in size and has now become one of the most prominent communities in the country. Whereas Hispanic and Latin American Heritage Month is an opportunity to celebrate the achievements and contributions of Hispanic Canadians as well as their history, contributions, and culture. Now therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim the month of October 29 as Hispanic Latin Heritage Month in the City of Sault Ste. Marie.
Thank you
Thank you very much for all your work.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
So, Madam Clerk, that brings us to
Brings us to 5.7.
5.7, which is related to item 7.6.1 on your agendas. Council, you have the staff report. What we're going to do is we're going to hear from Mr. McDonald, who's here on behalf of the Water Tower Inn. He'll have 5 minutes to address you. And then we're going to hear from Mr. Bichelia, who's here on behalf of Marley Investments. He'll have 5 minutes to address you. After we're addressed from the delegations, you'll have an opportunity to ask staff any questions you have, as well as the delegations if you have any questions arising out of the delegations. So, Councillor Shoemaker and Councillor Hilsinger. Okay, so we'd invite Mr. McDonald on behalf of the Water Tower Inn if you wanted to take the opportunity to. Now, I see a number of people here in white lab coats. I'm just going to go out on a limb and guess you're with Atomica. So when we're done this presentation, if we get done it before this discussion, before 5:30, before the planning agenda, we'll call that matter up because it's actually quite a bit farther down our agenda, but we'll try and move it up for you so you could maybe leave a little earlier than you expected. In the meantime, we'll have to deal with this, so we're on 5.7. So, Mr. McDonald, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, city staff. I was here in August, and it was much appreciated that a resolution was passed to seek clarification from staff regarding the interpretation of the C4 zoning exclusion for heavy equipment as it relates to the proposed site for a Cal Tire commercial industrial tire service location on Old Garden River Road. Mr. Hilsinger is here, also here, but I don't represent him as the chairman of Cara Community, Mr. Jeff Meekin, in the rear row. Cara Community has 200 residential units immediately across the street on the south side of Old Garden River Road, who have expressed in a prior letter of concern to the city that they are concerned with regard to the implications of the decision that's been made, at least on a tentative basis, by staff. And that tentative basis, just to refresh everyone's memory if they need it, is that city staff were of the view that heavy equipment service and repair did not include transport tractor trailers or vehicles of that nature, which permitted, it appears, the developer who's here tonight to proceed with a lease arrangement that's underway at this time. So you have a report, which we were able to get a copy of on Friday afternoon. I must confess that it's not what I was expecting in terms of information, clarity. Certainly looking for clarity in that report, I found it rather difficult. There is no definition really spelled out or any criteria for which the staff could point to as to the decision that they made. There appears to be some back and forth about the Highway Traffic Act, but it's clear from the report, if you do read it, that heavy equipment is not defined in the Highway Traffic Act, and it's not defined in our bylaw. So we don't know what it is, at least in a written form. But everybody does know that transport trucks and trailers are commercial vehicles, and they're also heavy trucks that are prohibited at the present time from even being on Old Garden River Road or other city streets except for designated arterial truck routes. It's interesting that the report points out that, among other locales, Windsor defines heavy equipment as including transports. Sudbury also defines in its bylaw and makes it very clear that commercial transports are included in their definition of heavy equipment as well. So I don't know how there could be a great deal of debate between municipalities about the fact that other municipalities and their planners have gone down this road before, pardon the expression, and have banned the servicing and repair of transport trucks in commercial zones. But that doesn't come out very clearly in the report to you, but that is in fact the truth. Mr. King's report is somewhat in error. No offense to him, but he states that Sudbury doesn't have a definition of a heavy equipment, but if you look at the handout that I gave to each of you on page 1 and 2 of that document, you can clearly see that Sudbury has defined heavy equipment to include transport trucks or trailers. It's very top, in the middle of the and bottom of the first page. You can also see that the city of Ottawa, another significant municipality in this province defines heavy equipment servicing to include transport trucks or trailers. And if you consider that the report to council was to deal with a planning matter, there appears to be little or no planning consideration raised with regard to the compatibility or even the comparability of a transport truck's impact on this water tower in location, for example, and that of a backhoe or a farm tractor or some of the other vehicles that may well be defined even in the city's definition as heavy equipment. So it's not particularly helpful, I would submit, and if you're reading it, I'm not sure if you found it helpful in getting to the place where we had hoped to be. It also was surprising that Mr. King's report, Mr. King's not a planner, of course, disregards the fact that there are no municipalities that I could find after a significant search in Ontario that permit commercial vehicle repair and or transport truck repair in a commercial zone. And those include Sudbury, Windsor, Thunder Bay, Ottawa, North Bay, London, Hamilton, Huntsville. Most of those are in here so you can see that I'm not making this up. Some of them define service repair of transports as a transport terminal. Others just make it clear that they are not retail, and they are certainly, I could find no examples where the use that the city staff has suggested falls within any other bylaw. I was surprised to learn, which was contrary to what we were told by staff, that there was no precedent upon which staff were relying when they made this decision. That comes out clearly in the report, and yet that is not what the indications were. In fact, the interpretation is inconsistent with any other precedent, and I would submit that if you refer to the definition at page 5 of the handout, which is a very large Canadian heavy equipment dealer, Publiquip, that as I've highlighted there, you can see that their definition includes motorized heavy vehicles and their trailers under the definition of heavy equipment. They're not the only ones. The heavy equipment auctioneer, the biggest one in the world, I think, Ritchie Brothers, at page 7 of our handout, shows that heavy equipment in their inventory and their auctions, both Canadian and otherwise, at page 9, for example, you'll see that they include construction, agriculture, transport trucks, trailers, buses, concrete, mining equipment, etc., all under the definition of heavy equipment. So with all due respect to Mr. King's report to you, he's provided little or nothing to indicate a basis for what is, I would submit, a very significant misinterpretation of what was meant by council when they passed this exclusion. This zone is not the only zone that's going to be affected by this interpretation. This would set a precedent that would permit a transport truck repair facility, and they are loud, vibration, smell, but in particular, the noise from these is like a war zone. And it may not be the only product line that Cal Tire has, but it's probably their biggest. There's no doubt about that. Staff, I would submit, made a mistake. They were asked to review it in April of this year. The developer was asked to reconsider, and the steamroll of construction continued on. I have a letter that comes from the general manager today of one of the large transport truck sales and repair facilities. They do not do tires in Sault Ste. Marie. And this gentleman, and I'll quote him, says, "On all road trucks, be it vocational or highway, are definitely considered heavy equipment. All the technicians need to hold a journeyman license in heavy equipment repair in order to work on this type of equipment." And he goes on to cite a number of other significant concerns about the location, traffic, etc. So none of this research was done by staff, and they could easily have contacted their counterparts in Sudbury or elsewhere and find out that they take a completely reverse direction in view of of what is good planning. So there does not appear to have been any attempt to go out and determine the real damage that would occur if the interpretation was made that was given to Mr. Palumbo and his firm. They ignored the fact that the transports are not permitted on Old Garden River Road for a reason. Damage, noise, constriction of the road sizes, turning circles. Are all these other municipalities wrong? In fairness, Mr. Palumbo and his company have owned this property for 11 years. It's very clear, and they would have known this before they bought it, that it was not zoned for heavy equipment repair, whether it's leased to a tenant for that purpose or something that the owner would do of their own. We asked this be stopped in April. It did not stop. It continued even after I came before council in August. It continued on after that. It has the appearance of someone trying to force the hand of council not to enforce its bylaw because it might look like it's too late. But these were all known issues and certainly were known well before now, before people would continue down a road that we submit. It cannot be justified under your bylaw. And this is your bylaw. It's not the staff's bylaw to interpret.
Mr. McDonald, you're coming close to 15 minutes, which is...
I apologize. It's difficult to cover the report in such a short time span. It is an extremely significant matter to my client, Mr. Mayor.
I anticipated we would be here, but you're going to have to...
I'm going to wrap it up.
Wrap it up.
Right now, this decision doesn't just affect the Water Tower Inn. It affects any church, school, or residential property, be it the Legion site, the El Gero call center site, any other place that's C4 in our city. There has been a large amount of public support in favor of Mr. Hilsinger's and our position, and we would be not in line with, and we'd be falling far out of line with other major municipalities, and with common sense in trying to place this extremely disruptive and damaging use in the presence of and under the windows of the Water Tower Inn, or any other C4 zone for that matter. Thank you for your time. I apologize if I've gone slightly over, especially to the Atomica people as well, but this is a matter that has a great deal of concern commercially. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Mr. Bisceglia, we do have 5 minutes before the planning agenda begins, so we can certainly hear your submissions. Appreciating that I gave Mr. McDonald some latitude, I would similarly give you a bit of latitude, but I don't think I would give you as much. I think between you and Mr. McDonald, we could probably be here all evening.
I better get some water.
Yeah.
I had some photographs that I wanted to start my presentation with.
I think, Frank, you sent them to
Thank you.
city staff, and Frank has arranged for them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of council, Mr. Hilsinger, other guests. I will be relatively brief in terms of my comments, because I think what we've heard here tonight, and I heard the other night when Mr. McDonald was here, was hyperbole, exaggeration, and misstatement of facts. I'll deal with that first. Secondly, I'll deal with the report that was prepared by council for the city, which was well-researched, well-supported by authorities, and references were made to the statutory provisions that are applicable. In my respectful submission, you should vote in favor of accepting the report as presented to council, and I hope that I can indicate why you should do that. The photographs, please. Go ahead. The first photograph is a piece of the property that is owned by Mr. Hilsinger, and we have some heavy equipment there. There's no question that that's heavy equipment. That is the building, and this site was formerly an industrial site occupied by, I believe, MTO. I may be wrong about that, but that's the zoning of that property is C4, the same as the Palumbo property. Next photograph. This is what you see from the road on Old Garden River Road. Next photograph. This is a transport, and there are all kinds of transports that are on the water tower property from time to time. The refrigeration units operate and make noise, and there is no issue with respect to those transports being on that particular property by Mr. Hilsinger, because I guess it serves his purpose. Next photograph. That's what you see in terms of the condition of the buildings that are on that property adjacent to the Cal Tire site. Next. Not maintained, dilapidated, and not anything that we should be proud of across from a housing project that Mr. Hilsinger makes reference to as objecting to what's there. Next photograph. Again, there's no drainage. There's all kinds of boarded up windows. That's the beautification that you view from Cal Tire. Next photograph. Again, same photograph. Continue. And that's it. Those are the photographs. There's the equipment. In public view, that is heavy equipment. That's what's on the C4 property. And there's the other photograph.
Mr. Michelle, if I can ask you maybe to focus your comments on the crux of the issue, which is the definition of heavy equipment and what's before council.
Yeah, I'm addressing that, but I wanted to give you some background with all due respect, because there seems to be objection to what has been happening or what has happened with the Cal Tire site, which I think is a great improvement to what was there. It's paved, and the development control agreement with the municipality of the city of Sault Ste. Marie between the developer and the city has all kinds of green space, had landscaping, totally paved, first-class operation. And I want the neighbors to know that that's what they're getting with this particular development. The development began in late 2018 and early 2019. It was reviewed by every department in the city of Sault Ste. Marie. There was dark meetings, and everyone put their best foot forward to develop this site in a first-class manner. And Mr. Palumbo's properties are all first class. I mean, you look at any and all of his properties and his buildings, they're well maintained, they have green areas, and he complies with every requirement necessary. So, as the matter developed, we entered into a development control agreement. It's registered. We now have an occupancy permit for 66 Old Garden River Road. So permits were issued, development proceeded in accordance with the development control agreement, in compliance with the Ontario Building Codes and other bylaws. And we now have an occupancy permit for Cal Tire to move in. The other misrepresentation is the fact that heavy equipment is going to be brought on site, repaired. That's absolutely not true. The move by Cal Tire to the present location is in order to proceed and deal with retail tire sales, which they don't have now in the industrial park. And as a person having an interest in a hotel located next to what was Western Tire for over 25 years, there's nothing incompatible with respect to having a tire store, retail store, and a hotel close by. When I came on this file, one of the proposals I put to Mr. Hilsinger when he was concerned about the situation was this. You have that other property on Old Garden River Road. If you're concerned about the buffer zone that you want Mr. Palumbo to pay for your hotel, why don't you give them the property on the Old Garden River Road so we, in fact, can stay away from the building that you own, the hotel, if you'd like to. There was no response to that. So we can't provide a buffer zone for the hotel at the expense of other property owners. It's that simple. So that's the background and the backdrop that you have here with respect to this property. In looking at the situation, it appears to me that staff did the following. Clearly, we don't have a definition in the bylaw as to what constitutes heavy equipment. But we have applied common sense in understanding what that term is, as did the planning staff, as did the city staff in coming up with approval of this development. And common sense in the dictionary definition makes heavy equipment mean equipment usually used for earth moving, mining, extraction of materials from the ground. And I have a definition from Wikipedia, which I'll share with you, which is spot on with the which is spot on with the conclusion that was made by your legal department based upon the case law and the authorities. It's heavy-duty vehicles, especially designed for executing construction tasks, most frequently ones involving earthwork operations. They are also known as construction equipment, construction plant, earth movers, engineering vehicles, or simply equipment. Now, I prefer that definition to Ritchie Brothers' catalog of what they sell at their auctions. And page 6 and 7 of the staff report, and I draw your attention to that, summarizes why the legal department came up with the conclusions that it did. It says the last paragraph, second last paragraph, excuse me. Various forms of heavy equipment exist. However, the strict distinction between a transport truck and heavy equipment is well established. In addition, we would suggest that a vehicle having a truck-like frame and being licensed under the Highway Traffic Act is not heavy equipment. They specifically exclude transports as being heavy equipment because there's other provincial legislation that requires that distinction to be made. I'm not here to give to this council a legal argument, and I apologize that I'm getting into that, but ultimately, it's not my respectful submission. What Mr. Hilsinger is asking you to do is to provide a definition of what heavy equipment is to include transport, because in my respectful submission, he wouldn't get to first base at a courtroom. Clearly, he's here to use a political venue to establish a legal precedent that makes absolutely no sense on the basis of reality, on the basis of common sense. I mean, like say an egg is an egg. Well, you don't have to describe what an egg is. You know what it is. We know what heavy equipment is, and if we didn't define it, because no one would be that silly to ask for a definition of it, because it's common sense. It's statutory interpretation. What does the plain language mean when you first read it? So he wants to use the political venue. I mean, if he's right in his argument, it becomes an enforcement situation. If we're not doing this, but assuming that you change a tire on a transport and that supposedly is against the law, enforce it. We'll try that. We'll have a court make that determination. But he wants to come here get an expanded definition of heavy equipment so that he can block this development. Because every other reason that we've had up till now has got nothing to do with what heavy equipment is or isn't. And your legal department has clearly indicated that there's an exception in the bylaw in the sense of delivery by a transport is permissible on any road, delivery of goods and services to some degree. And also, under our bylaw, what's permitted is to bring a vehicle for repairs. There isn't going to be a dozer on this property that's going to be repaired. There isn't going to be any backhoe. There isn't going to be that kind of equipment. There's no interest in that. There will be strict compliance with the C4 zoning. That's the truth. And all this other stuff and all of this other information or misinformation is to create an atmosphere of fear on the part of the public. And with all due respect, that's not fair to Mr. Palumbo. It's not fair to Cal Tire. It's a C4 zone. We will deal with this property on the basis of a C4 zone. And if we don't do that, then there's an enforcement provision. Permits that were issued in good faith based on interpretation. Work was done in good faith by the developer and by Cal Tire. Occupancy permits have been given out, and all of a sudden we have this ringer, as I call it. It's a nonsense argument designed to expand a definition that can't be defined by this council in that sense. And even if you did, I don't think it would be retrospective.
Retroactive.
Retroactive. Retrospective or retroactive. So, where does that get, Mr. Hilsing? You can't pass a retroactive bylaw at this point. Every tire service dealer in the city of Sault Ste. Marie couldn't service a transport. It's crazy. Thank you. Those are my comments.
Thank you. So with that noted, council, thank you, Mr. Pachelia. We are past 5:30, so we're going to stand this matter down. We're going to get to the planning agenda. We're going to go into planning. We're going to deal with our planning matters, and then we'll come right back to this matter, and I'll start with staff when we get back to this matter. So, Madam Clerk, if we can go to planning, please.
Under agenda item 7.7.1, that's application A1119Z, 412 Second Line West and 236 Prentice Avenue. Motion by Councillors Scott and Bezo Allen resolved that the report of the senior planner dated September 9, 2019 concerning application A1119Z be received and that the application be postponed to October 7, 2019.
Mr. Tenazzo, if you can just briefly give us an update on this application and then explain to us the disposition today. If we can have Peter Tenazzo's mic, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the second time that the staff and the applicant have requested a postponement on this matter. The applicant wants more time to assess alternative designs and the costs associated with those. So the applicant's not here tonight to address this matter, but the recommendation is to postpone to the October 7th meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, and as I understand, the applicant reached out to me and confirmed that they didn't have to be in attendance as a result of discussion with your office, that there would be a postponement, so.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so we know the applicant isn't here. Is there anybody else here that's here to speak in favor of the application? Anybody to speak in opposition to it or in opposition to a postponement? Seeing none, council, if we could have a vote on that matter. All in favor? Carried. So, Madam Clerk, if we can go to 7.7.2. Once your vote, I guess, is, council, if the voting is up on your tablets, if you could please.
Councillor Hollingsworth?
It's not showing up on hers.
Yeah.
I don't know if Frank's with us right now, but if he is, some of the councilors aren't getting the voting on their tablets, Frank. Councilor Nero didn't. You got it now? I think Councilor Hollingsworth is having a problem with her tablet.
Under agenda item 7.7.2, A1419Z, 25 Drive-In Road, a motion by Councillors Gardy and Vezo-Allen, resolved that the report of the planner dated September 9, 2019 concerning rezoning application A1419Z be received, and that the subject property be rezoned from highway zone to highway zone with a special exception to permit retail trade as an additional permitted use. Further, that the legal department be requested to prepare the necessary bylaw to effect the same.
Mr. Tanaz, if I can ask you to give an indication of
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The subject property is on the northwest corner of Great Northern Road and Drive-In Road. It's occupied, it's about a 10,500 square foot, 3-unit strip mall that's on the property. And the applicant is seeking council's approval to add retail sales as an additional permitted use. The recommendation is to approve, and Mr. Berdeniak is here on behalf of this application. Thank you.
Mr. Berdeniak, could you please step to the microphone?
Hi.
Are you the applicant in this application, Mr. Berdeniak?
Yes, I am.
That presents a problem to me, Mr. Berdeniak.
Okay.
As you're a client of mine, I had no knowledge you were the applicant in this.
Okay.
But I will step away. The acting mayor, much to his chagrin, is Corey Gardy. Mr. Gardy. He started the night by asking me if I had any conflicts. I said, no, I'm not conflicted on anything tonight. He said, good.
I'm just going to refer to this for one moment. So would you like to proceed in kind of explaining what's going to be going on with the property?
We don't have any plans. There's nobody that's wanting to move into the spot right now, but we're hoping that if we can expand the zoning to allow retail, that it'll be a more sought-after site. We've owned it for about a year, and we haven't had much interest in it at all.
Okay. Council, are there any questions? None?
You'll want to ask if anybody's here to speak against.
Sure. If there's anybody here to speak against this, you're welcome to approach the mic. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
It doesn't seem that there is, so I guess we'll go to a vote. It should be up on your screen.
I couldn't do yours manually.
Could you? Okay.
Affirmative?
Yes. Councillor Hollingsworth still having trouble?
The room. Councillor Scott's.
My iPad went kaput a couple days ago, and we didn't have any replacements, so I'm using a different piece.
Motion carries.
Motion carries. Thank you. Next is
Under Agenda Item 7.7.3, Application A1519Z, 1187 Great Northern Road. A motion by Councillor Scott and Vezo-Allen resolved that the report of the planner dated September 9, 2019 concerning rezoning application A1519Z be received, and that the subject property be rezoned from highway zone with a special exception to highway zone with an amended special exception to permit an electrical contractor's electrician's shop as an additional permitted use. Further, the legal department be requested to prepare the necessary bylaw to effect the same. And subsequent to the report being submitted for agenda, there was a neighborhood meeting. It was held on September 4. There's a memo at your desks to say that no members of the public attended that meeting, and also to point out that there was a change of ownership, that the owner of the property is now Tambari Electric Limited.
okay. Thank you, Mr. Tenaza. Would you like to go forward and give us some background?
Thank you. Properties on the west side of Great Northern Road. It's about halfway between 3rd and 4th line. This is an application to permit a contractor's yard specific to that of an electrician, and the recommendation is to approve, and Mr. Lepore is here to speak on behalf of the applicant. Thank you.
I'll let the real mayor take his chair.
Welcome to council, Mr. Lepore.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. My client
is Tabari Electric Limited. As you've noted in the addendum to the council report, it is now the registered owner of the subject property. We're seeking a rezoning to allow his business to operate from the subject site. The planning report speaks for itself. If there are any questions from council, I'd be happy to address those this evening.
So do we have any questions of the applicant's counsel? Seeing none? Thank you, Mr. Poor. Is anybody else here to speak in favor of the application? Anybody else here to speak in opposition to the application? Council, do we have any questions of staff on the application? Seeing none, if we can have a vote on the application, all in favor? The application is carried. Good luck, Mr. Bari. Madam Clerk, does that finish the planning agenda?
Yes, it does.
So we will go back to the issue of, we're dealing with under
7.6.1.
5.7. So council, we have the staff report in front of us. We've heard from Mr. McDonald on behalf of Mr. Hilsiger and his organization. We've heard from Mr. Petracco on behalf of the developer. Before we get into the staff report, Mr. Bishelia, before we go into the staff report, I want actually to ask Mr. Tenazzo, if he could, if we can have Mr. Tenazzo's mic. I think an important issue was raised, Mr. Tenazzo, in that this is largely about planning. The staff came from, the report came from legal, but this is really about planning and good planning. So I think it's important, as we start off, to give our planning department, through you, an opportunity to share its perspective on this matter. And then maybe that will sharpen some of the questions council might have for any of you or the delegations we received tonight.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just, in listening to Mr. McDonald, certainly as it relates to, I'll address very briefly what I see as good planning. But I wanted to back up, and I've also done a review of various zoning bylaws, and I think Mr. McDonald, I respectfully disagree. I think Mr. McDonald has said that there's one way that municipalities are interpreting this, and that, in my research, is absolutely not the case. And I'll reference some municipalities here, and these are municipalities where I've spoken to their planners, or I've read their bylaws and then spoken to their planners to confirm. So there appears to be three basic ways that municipalities are interpreting this kind of thing. That being a passenger vehicle versus heavy equipment versus a transport truck. And call it the most non-restrictive way, if you will. Timmins and Parry Sound would be two examples of two bylaws that don't distinguish between fixing a piece of heavy equipment, fixing a transport truck, or fixing a passenger vehicle. And they allow that in a commercial zone. So those would be two communities that do explicitly allow that, and I spoke to both those communities today. Second, I disagree. I think Mr. McDonald has suggested that Thunder Bay is an example of a place that very strictly regulates this. Thunder Bay would be sort of the middle of the road approach to this, which is very consistent with the interpretation that we've made. So Thunder Bay distinguishes passenger vehicles, they distinguish heavy equipment. Their definition of heavy equipment does not include transport trucks. So they're very consistent with the way that we've done it. So if you're in the city of Thunder Bay, a Cal Tire, for example, could locate in a commercial zone and fix passenger vehicle tires, transport truck tires, but not heavy equipment tires. So again, that's very consistent with the way that we do it. And then third would be the quote-unquote most restrictive, which I didn't speak to this, and I didn't speak to planners, but I assume that they're out there. I take Mr. McDonald's word. He references Ottawa. So there are other municipalities that have their own definition of heavy equipment that specifically says a transport truck is heavy equipment, and then they have exclusions that wouldn't allow transport trucks to be fixed at the same, in a commercial setting under the same premises as a passenger vehicle. So again, there are these three approaches, and our interpretation tends to land right about in the middle of where these approaches are. I also just wanted to speak, and again, the truck route bylaw, I think it's noted that trucks aren't allowed on Old Garden River Road, but the reality is there are exclusions, and trucks are allowed to travel off the truck routes to make deliveries. Deliveries by transports are commonplace, whether you work here at City Hall, you see them, or the water tower inn, or any large and small commercial use. They've got transports coming to and from the property. When you look at this triangle of the area surrounding this property, it's all Zone C4, so it's all Zone General Commercial. That permits a number of uses that by their very nature include transport trucks. Delivery and courier services would be one. Another would be a commercial property, or sorry, a commercial parking lot, which again exists in this block, which is a property that has transport trucks parking on it. So I think transport trucks coming to and from the site really isn't the issue here. That's just permitted because you're in a commercial area. So from a land use standpoint, from a compatibility standpoint, I think what the question comes down to is there a difference between taking the tire off a transport truck and taking the tire off a passenger vehicle? And I think when you boil it down to that, it really provides a scope and a context to this. And from a planning standpoint, we've said that for all intents and purposes, there really isn't that much of a difference between those two, repairing those two vehicles of this nature. So I hope that provides some context for things here, and I'm certainly available to answer any additional questions you might have.
Okay, and Council, before we get into questions, I think it's important to understand the issue before us. So there was a point that Mr. Bichelia raised, which was that if you were to send staff back to amend the bylaw, that would be a change in a bylaw, and arguably it wouldn't retroactively apply. But that actually isn't what Mr. McDonald's asked for. Mr. McDonald isn't asking you to amend the bylaw, and I think probably he appreciates that if you did amend the bylaw, it wouldn't retroactively apply. What Mr. McDonald suggested is that the bylaw as it stands isn't being interpreted properly. And the bylaw as it stands should be interpreted differently. So that isn't necessarily an amendment of the bylaw. It's a suggestion that staff hasn't been interpreting the bylaw properly to date. So what we asked staff to do last month when we were here is explain to us how and why they interpreted the bylaw the way they did. That's what you have in front of you. So the question before us, I think, is did staff interpret this term reasonably and appropriately in the circumstances? It's quite consistent and often in legal situations that not all terms in a bylaw or a law are actually defined. As Mr. Bichelia pointed out, some terms are defined, some terms aren't defined, and the terms that aren't defined, there are rules to statutory interpretation where you have to apply an ordinary and usual meaning to them. So we were asking ourselves, in reflection on the report, whether we think staff acted properly in interpreting the bylaw. I do recognize it's our bylaw, but all of the bylaws are interpreted and enforced by our staff, every one of them. So it is their job to do that. And in this case, there was a suggestion that they didn't interpret it correctly, and that's been brought to our attention, and now we're considering that. So the information that's before us is the information staff provided. You've had the submissions from the two proponents that have an interest in the outcome of this discussion. Now I think I'll leave it to you to ask what any questions you believe in your role as a city councillor is appropriate of staff, and if you do have questions of the proponents, I would permit that also. Councillor Vezoal.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Tonazzo. Mr. Tonazzo, what business was located on that property previously before the developer started doing the renovations?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezoal, I believe at one time it was a fire hall, and then I'm not 100% sure what the owner might be able to answer that question better than me.
Originally, that site was the site for the then Terrantaurus Board of Works. Subsequent to that, it became a fire hall and ambulance service. After that, it was used by basically empty, not much more.
How long has the property been empty?
There's been detailing and storage of items there, but technically, they've never had a tenant in there after it was a fire hall.
So detailing as in detailing vehicles, or? So there.
Washing cars, waxing cars, there was undercoating of cars.
Mr. Bichelia, if we're, maybe you should come to the microphone.
Yeah.
Only because nobody at home would be able to hear what
Yeah.
you have to say. So for the sake of people that are watching.
So my question to you is, what was the use of the property prior to the renovations?
It was used by the North Side group for detailing cars. undercoating cars, and was used for surplus work on behalf of the dealerships and storage of parts and so on, tires.
So was that work being done inside the building, or was it done outside?
That work was being done inside, but vehicles were parked on the outside. I don't know what else was done outside. I can't answer that. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. Just one more question to Mr. Tonazzo. Under the C4 bylaw, you can sell, supply, vehicle sales, parts, dealers. Has there been any conversation with Cal Tire as to what their scope of business is going to be? Has there been any confirmation to them through planning?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo-Allen, the discussion that we had with Cal Tire is that they are planning to service some transport trucks, but their primary business is passenger vehicles. I think the big piece here for us was that there's no outdoor storage permitted in that commercial zone, so they have had to alter some of their things so that they can achieve that part of the bylaw. So there would be no outdoor storage of tires and things of that nature that you might see in other tire shops around town. That's not the case here.
So just one
I
for
can add to that as well. In order to accommodate storage, the building was built at 50 Old Garden River Road at an additional cost of $150,000 in order to try and appease Mr. Hillsonger.
Okay, so Mr. Bichelle, I'm just going to ask you to not answer any questions that aren't directed directly at you, because then I would have to give multiple people an opportunity to speak to them.
Yeah. I only have one other question, Mr. Tonazzo. With the permits, was there anything to do with hours of operation within that permitting for Cal Tire?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, zoning, the Planning Act, we can't regulate hours of operation. My understanding is it's a general daytime business, but that's not something that we can regulate through the Planning Act.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We don't have a representative from Cal Tire here, do we?
No.
No. Because I do have some questions regarding if this is passed, what will Cal Tire, will they have the tires stored outside? The hours of operation? Transports, are they going to be repaired outside or are they repaired inside? I mean, that's...
Yeah, I think those are good, but I think those questions could be answered because there was site plan control here, and planning staff would work for a period of time to make sure the site was developed in a specific way. So, Mr. Tonazzo, if you can go through maybe that history and what accommodations have been made outside of hours of service, like what is in planning's control, what did planning focus on, and what are some of the conditions planning had to actually locate at this site?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So through site plan control, there's always the standard things. So paving, drainage, landscaping. In this case, you've got a commercial use abutting a commercial use, so there's no buffering requirement. There's no outdoor storage permitted in a commercial zone, so I believe, as Mr. Bichelia has stated, they're in the process of, if they haven't already, they're building a garage on the western side of the property. So that will become an enforcement matter. At the end of the day, the hope is that everything will remain clear and there'll be no outdoor storage beyond regular parked vehicles. In terms of servicing of vehicles, on the site plan at I'd say the northwest corner of the building, there is a pad that would be set aside for transport trucks to pull in, have the tire serviced. We're not talking about retreading or anything. This is just tire off, tire on. So that is planned to happen outside.
Okay. And again, back to hours of operation, you don't know if it's a 24/7 operation or not?
It's through you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know. It's nothing that we're able to control through site plan control.
Understandable. I just kind of curious.
Maybe we know, does the developer know Cal Tire's current hours of operation?
8 in the morning to 5.
So Cal Tire currently operates from 8 to 5.
Now, you mentioned buffer zone. There's nothing that the developer can place, and I asked Mr. Palumbo, to kind of alleviate some of the view from the water tower. There's nothing that staff has recommended?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think when you look at, I mean, the water tower inn is multiple stories up, and in order to get an appropriate buffer, you'd have to build a pretty significant wall that would in and of itself become, I think, I would suggest a bit of an eyesore. From a commercial standpoint, hotels are often a little bit of an anomaly in the sense that they're commercial uses whose main business is to provide overnight accommodation. And they're in commercial zones. And when you go to other communities and you stay in hotels, oftentimes they're located in busy commercial areas, whether it be on a Trans-Canada highway or the 401 or under the flight path of an airport. So, you know, they're sensitive in nature, but they don't meet the definition of a sensitive use under the provincial policy statement, in that there are some sensitivities there, but they live in that commercial landscape, so to speak. So I'm not suggesting that you know, we can, you know, it can be difficult just because of the use of the hotel that lives in that commercial landscape that has other uses.
I'm not saying the third floor, fourth floor, whatever, but say ground level. Is there any type of buffer zone for the ground floor area? This way there is a kind of a divide between the hotel and Cal Tire.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, at this point, I believe there's some vegetation, and I believe there is a chain link fence that's there. There's more of a physical barrier than a visual barrier. Just from a land use standpoint, I mean, you could do a 6-foot wooden fence. I'm not sure that would really achieve much of anything, to be quite honest.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, I'll do Mr. Tanazo. Out of curiosity, was there any neighborhood town hall meeting with the other individuals and groups?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. In this instance, staff made the interpretation that this met the zoning bylaw, so there was no planning act, no section 30, so there was no rezoning, no official plan amendment required, so there's no public notice required. The site plan control process doesn't include public notice or neighborhood consultation. That's a staff exercise, so there was no neighborhood consultation.
Okay, just a couple more questions. As you've been dealing with the developer, has the developer said to you that they've reached out to the other property owners just to find out if there's any concerns? And if so, do you know if they were trying to act on them?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, I don't want to speak for the developer. My understanding is that there have been overtures, if you will, to see if there could be some common ground.
Okay. And just two other questions. No neighborhood meeting to your knowledge. And of course, this group will have to follow environmental concerns. I believe that our city has some bylaws around environmental concerns when it comes to chemicals, oils, and so forth, leaching and so forth.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, I think those would be building code matters. I suspect that the floor would have to be a certain way so that in the event, you know, in this cement pad, there would have to be some internal drainage, if you will, to make sure that if there are oils or things that do get spilt, they're captured on site, yes.
Okay. And just one last question, maybe it's for the developers. If you'd like to just take the microphone when, yeah, thank you. Thank you. We talked about barriers, and of course, the hotel has many different floors, as we just established. There was a quick comment about there's some vegetation. Would you be open-minded, based on, of course, how large the property is, would you be open-minded to sit down with Mr. Hilsinger and to talk about maybe adding trees or adding some more flowers or something that just gives it a little more pleasing to the eye? And I know that in past properties, you pride yourself on landscaping. Can you?
All I can say is that at the end of the day, we're going to be living as neighbors with Mr. Hilsinger, and the last thing we want is a continuing conflict. Having said that, I should indicate that there is a development control agreement that's been signed, certain pavement has been done, but we would not be averse to communicating with him in that respect. My feeling is that, and I loved Mr. Hilsinger, I had many dealings with him together. He's just not happy to have Cal Tire there. And so if you start with that basic premise, I don't know how far we can go to deal with the situation. But, yes, I'm prepared to have a sit-down meeting with him and do whatever is necessary to try and calm the waters, so to speak.
Okay, and thank you. And look forward to maybe Mr. Tadazzo can help make that happen. Thank you.
Councilor Dufour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is for Mr. Tenazzo. Mr. Tenazzo, in evaluating this application and interpreting the zoning bylaw for this property, did staff make their interpretation in a manner that was consistent with how they've always historically interpreted the bylaw?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, I think in terms of how we've interpreted the bylaw and applied it sort of to industrial zones, yes. We have had some examples and some experience, quite dated experiences with folks coming in for rezonings in rural area zones, for example, to allow heavy equipment maintenance and repair, especially up and around the Fifth Line area where we have a little bit of a node up there, so to speak. As far as applying this in a commercial zone, we haven't had that opportunity. This was the first time that this very specific type of interpretation was made.
Okay. Just as a follow-up, would you happen to know what the zoning of maybe some of Cal Tire's competitors would be? So I'm thinking here of maybe your Fountain Tire.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, Fountain Tire, I believe, is an M2 zone. Now there's a retread plant. There's a little bit more happening there. I believe there's a tire shop on Bruce Street that would have a commercial zoning, but I'm not sure the exact commercial zone. A lot of our service and repair shops are also zoned commercial.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, I have Councillor Scott next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Dufour actually asked one of my questions there, and that was just going to be whether or not there were any examples of a C4 zoning that did work on transports, but it sounds like there could be. We just don't have exact examples. But I do have another question, actually, and this goes into back when the location was a fire hall, just to get a little bit of a grasp on this. How long ago was that? Does anyone, I don't know if that would be through to Mr. Bishalia, or you know how long?
Chief, how long have you been a firefighter for?
Thank you.
Was it a fire hall while you've been a firefighter?
Yes, it was. I would say it was in the neighborhood of 2001 that it was, we left and went across the street to the new fire hall.
Great.
So
Thank you.
You're
Perfect.
welcome.
I actually have a follow-up then. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Chief Johnson, I have a follow-up for that. And it's just my own ignorance, so this is for some clarification. When fire trucks need to replace tires and et cetera, get some maybe service done, is it done at the hall at all, or is it usually brought off-site?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Scott, some are done at the hall and some are done off-site.
Okay, so if it were tire replacement, would that have been done at the hall?
For the larger tires on the aerial truck, it was done off-site.
Oh. That was basically the question, because I'm assuming that the water tower was operational when it was a fire hall, so thank you for your answer, and that was all my questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Christian, welcome to council today.
Thank you. My questions were asked. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Gardy.
I suspect it seems mine were as well. I'd just like to ask one question, if I could, to Mr. McDonald, please.
Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. McDonald. If there were a primary concern of Mr. Hilsinger, I can ask it of Mr. Hilsinger, what would it be? If you were to articulate your primary concern with this site, what would it be?
Noise. The equipment that Cal Tire uses and transport trucks are a very substantial part of their plans currently and in the future. Their equipment all exceeds 100 decibels. At 85 decibels, outside the space even where they are, their men and women have to wear hearing protection. They use pneumatic blasters to separate the tires that sound like a cannon. The drone of 2 platforms of 2 trucks at the same time, each usually having about 20 or 24 tires that could be changed even in sequence here. It's an all-day, every-day, noisy, smelly, disruptive thing, but the noise is absolutely the key. And I will say that Cal Tire, as well as all the commercial truck repair, tire repair services, do emergency repair 24 hours a day on site. So if transport truck's coming through Sault Ste. Marie at 4 o'clock in the morning and has a stripped tire, blown tire, separated wheel, whatever it may be, they call and out come the on-call staff at Cal Tire to this site to do that work and get that person back on the road. That's what they do. So this is not a nuisance issue, as Mr. Bujali would suggest it is. It's a catastrophe.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Carney? No, I'll ask. We've been through every council, but Councilor Nero. Okay. So all of mine have been addressed through the issues that council have raised. Yes, Councilor Hollingsworth.
Just one quick question. Is it a weekend business as well, or is it Monday to Friday? Is it Saturday as well?
I don't know the current hours of Cal Tire. If the proponent has anything to offer, Mr. Bichelli, do you know whether they operate on the weekends besides the on-call basis that Mr. McDonald's indicating? Yeah, please.
My understanding is that they don't operate on weekends. And if it's an emergency call, they may have a vehicle go out and do the emergency call for a transport. And in terms of the decibel reading that my friend referred to, we have a noise bylaw. If it exceeds the bylaw, then you can prosecute. It's an enforcement issue.
Yeah, as I understand the issue, when it was originally raised with me, there was a concern about the open storage. And so I had looked into that, and I was assured by staff that open storage was not going to be permitted. It was going to be prohibited specifically, and that was part of the site plan control. And then the issue was raised with the transport trucks coming on the property not being classified as heavy equipment, which is the issue that we're ultimately here today. But it's a matter of the transport truck tire coming off the transport, going inside, and then coming back out and going back on the vehicles. I understand it when I looked into it. So again, council, you've heard the representations by all the parties. You understand the basis upon which staff had made their decision and applied the bylaw. The procedural matter here is it's just before you for information, and it's received as information. If there are any councilors that, based on that information, wanted to make a motion to do something, that's within your purview to do, but we're just receiving it for information today, and if we receive it for information, nothing changes, and the only thing that would change is if council specifically had a measure that wanted to enforce. City council would certainly be in their jurisdiction to try and move that. So we have you read the motion, Madam Clerk?
It's a motion by Councilors Gardy and Vezo-Allen, resolved that the report of the Solicitor Prosecutor dated September 9, 2019, concerning definition of heavy equipment as per zoning bylaw 2005-150 be received as information.
Okay, all in favor? Yes. So you have the votes, the electronic votes. Is it showing up on everybody's tablets? So Councilor Dufour, tablet is not, is IT still in the room?
Is your vote in the affirmative or?
Okay.
Councillor Christian? Are you in the affirmative or in the negative? Councillor Hollingsworth?
Did you vote in affirmative? Yeah. Okay, so it's been received. Gentlemen, that is the extent of this matter. Mr. McDonald, the report has been received as information, and as it stands, the definition that staff has put forward has not been changed by council. It's been received, and I'm available tomorrow to speak to you about the matter if you want to talk about it further, but from my perspective, that's the conclusion of it.
We'll go to 7.3.2.
So we go to the, yes, we're going to deal with the, thank you, Mr. Shelley, Mr. Palumbo. We're going to deal with Entomica, so we'll deal with your matter now, and we have a staff report on that matter. Council, we have a number of people here from Entomica. Tom has a report, Mr. Ver has a report on the agenda for you. Any questions of Mr. Ver? Was there a presentation on this, Mr. Ver? I don't think so, eh? No. Just a show of support in the gallery. So, Council, if you have any questions for Mr. Ver, you're welcome to ask them now.
Should I read the motion?
Yeah, so Madam Clerk will read the motion.
Agenda item 7.3.2, Entomica Economic Development Fund request. There's the motion by Councillors Gardy and Vezo-Allen. Resolved that the report of the Deputy CAO Community Development and Enterprise Services concerning Entomica EDF request be received, and the request for funding in the amount of $85,362 from the Economic Development Fund be approved to the Sault Ste. Marie Insectarium with a condition that a business plan is provided by March 9, 2020. Further, that council approve an amendment to the previous EDF agreement to reflect the use of funds to hire full-time NOHFC interns, part-time insect care staff, and the acquisition of additional insects for programming.
Okay. Council, do we have any questions of Mr. Ver? None? Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you to Mr. Ver, thank you, Mr. Ver, for the report, very thorough, as well as to Entomica for the information provided as appendices. Very thorough is probably an understatement on that. Mr. Ver, there's some comment in here, and I'm just trying to find it, that there may be a request in the future for yearly funding, but for clarity, for my clarity, the funding that's being requested at this point is only a one-time injection, if I can put it that way.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, that's correct. It's just one-time funding.
And the reasonings in the report, but generally speaking, to help them establish and gain their footing in the newly renovated Bush Plain location.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, yes, that's correct. And I know we've been working with the folks at Entomica, and they have identified some other potential funding sources that they'll be applying to in their business plan to be enhanced in the future.
And with respect to this prospect for future annual funding or base funding, that would have to come back to council if it were ever to be considered or brought forward again?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, that's correct. It would have to come forward to council. And in fact, right now at this time, we don't have a funding pool or policy related to ongoing sustaining grants other than organizations that were grandfathered in previously. And that we have communicated that to the folks at Entomica.
Okay. So that was my next question. They are aware of that issue?
Through Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, that's correct.
Okay. Okay, those are my questions on this report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Mr. Ver. My colleague asked of it, just to clarify. So these funds, if they're successful tonight, these funds may help them with some future grants. And in your knowledge, are they applying for any grants?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. In our conversations with the folks at Entomica, yes, these funds will assist them in hiring staff, which the executive director, which will allow them also to have dedicated staff that can be applying for different grants. They've also, on their own, chased down a number of potential grant opportunities, and they are pursuing those grants. And we listed some of those in the report.
Okay. And again, for the folks at home, do they have their charity status yet, or are they in the process of applying for their charity status?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. They do have their charitable status. They, as I understand, they are still waiting for the numbers to come through that, oh, sorry, John, you can clarify.
No, my apologies. We don't have our charitable. We still have only our non-for-profit. The application hasn't been approved.
It's pending?
It's pending, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, John.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Dr. Dides. And it's my understanding that Atomica has been a community provider, helping our community, helping our schools for approximately 5-6 years, just to confirm?
At least.
At minimum, at least? Okay. Okay, I'll just keep my comments until that time.
Okay, Councillor Vezo-Allen.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm questioning the financial statements, so whoever would be able to answer questions relating to the financial statement and the ask.
I'll do my best, but our treasurer is in Holland right now. I'll do my best. Our treasurer is in Holland at the moment.
I noticed that part of the 85,000 and change ask from the EDF fund, just over 61,000 is to support an executive director position. And in your 2018 revenue, you listed, and that's in your audited statements from your accountant, your revenue is just over 118,000. Of that, over 86,000 is in grants. So from that granting income, I'm guessing, or I'm asking, was the majority of that restricted as per programs, designated staff such as interns, or were there some operational grants within that $86,000? I know I'm putting you a bit on the spot, but it's...
We use part of that money for operational and for staffing as well, if that answers your question.
So some of that was able to be used for operations?
We were given permission in an email, yes, from the city of Sault Ste. Marie, that even though we put in for two specific things for the grant,
right,
that we had the flexibility to hire other people with those funds and to use some of those funds for operations as well.
So my second question is, beyond getting the EDF fund to support your executive director with a salary of $61,000, how do you foresee moving forward if you have to self-fund that position?
It's really difficult. I don't think there's a science center or natural history museum in all of Canada that isn't funded somehow, either through a municipality, through provincials, or through federal grants. Unfortunately, we've had help from the city of Sault Ste. Marie, and we've gone to see our ministers and representatives to see if there's any funding, and unfortunately, those kind of funding opportunities don't exist anymore.
No.
Another condition of applying for some of the grants is that you have operational funds to meet the grant, whatever, the recommendations in the grant, the things in the grants that to qualify. And that's a very difficult thing to do. So you either have to come up with 70% of the operating funds to receive 30% of the funds, or the grants are 50-50 or somewhere thereof. So the funds from Sault Ste. Marie will help us to leverage for 4 potential funds that we're looking at right now. The Insert Promo Science Fund application that we've already completed and we're going to submit after this City Council meeting. And then the Canadian Experience Fund, the Canadian Cultural Spaces Fund, and the Ontario Rural Economic Development Fund. We're working with FedNor to help us with those, and we have approached the CDC, Dan Frya, to help us with our business plan that's also due in March. So because of the Atomica's growing not only with regards to our educational component, but our tourism component, as partnering with the Bush Plain Museum, we're hoping maybe that we can come back to council and discuss some of the tourism taxes that's being placed on the hotel rooms and see if we can get some help like that in the future. We don't know right now. We're going to focus on attempting to be self-sustainable with the income that we could potentially gain from the grant opportunities.
And one last question. Do you feel with finally having a paid executive director position that they will be able to help you to achieve further funding, further operations so that you can sustain that position? Will that be part of their mandate moving forward?
It hasn't been, but yes, I think that that's definitely needs to be put into place for future. We have one paid position that's working at Atomica, pretty much doing everything. So to focus on grant writing as well as facilitating all of the programming and traveling is very difficult. We're going to have to increase our capacity somehow to accommodate the move for we're going from being open 2 days a week to open 7 days a week and traveling to gain income from all of our outreach events. So it's a difficult thing to predict, but we're going to do our very best.
Thank you.
Councillor Dufour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is just for Mr. Ver. I noticed at the beginning of your report, it said that Atomica was asking for $134,000, and in your recommendation, you're recommending that we award them just over $85,000 with the condition that they present a business plan in March. Is the idea that at that meeting, when they present us their business plan, we would then be asked to grant the remainder, the remaining $50,000 and change?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, no, that wasn't our intent. We were hopeful that the contribution of the $85,362 and the hiring of the executive director and the intern that will support will enable them to source other funds to support operations.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? So, Mr. Didi's Atomica staff, I'm just going to tell you my perspective on this, and then we'll have a vote. I really struggled with this. I struggle with this because I think Atomica is great, and I think that the work that all of you do is great, and I want to see you thrive and survive. So I am going to support this ask, but my concern is that more and more costs that are properly the responsibility of other level of governments are falling to us at the municipal level. And we don't have the revenue generating mechanisms. Our revenue comes from realty taxes, which is a bit of an antiquated system, which we won't get into. But if you look at where things are going, and if you take Sears, for instance, and how a lot of commerce is moving online, it's harder to generate revenue from realty taxes. So if you look at just one example, is the Bush Plain, where you're located. This council thought the Bush Plain is a great community asset, but the Bush Plain deserved much greater support from the provincial government than it received. It's a provincial museum being supported mainly by our municipality. And I'm concerned that we're setting a precedent that we're going to continue to be relied upon to support functions that the other levels of government should support. So I'm here for you today because I think your work's been great. And whenever I've seen you, wherever I've seen you, and I've seen you lots of places, from elementary schools to senior centers, you do great work for our community. So I think based on that, we can kind of throw you this lifeline and help you get through, but you really need to find that self-sustaining model because it's going to be, there's a lot of need in the community. And our revenue isn't growing, and we've got to really try and do our best with it. And it's going to be difficult to support Atomica on an ongoing basis. I think you're worthy of support. I just think a different level of government should be stepping up and giving you that support. So for today's purposes, I'm here, and I'm going to vote in favor of this. And I hope we do what we need to do to continue Atomica, and whatever I can do to support your advocacy and support your organization, I'll continue to do. But it's going to be hard to if you look at how we fund our art gallery, which should be improved, and if Councillor Shoemaker and I were talking about this, if you look at how we fund our own museum, our municipal museum, which frankly has been underfunded for a number of years, we have to really start investing in those assets. Right? So we can't if we're taking up other levels of government's responsibility. So on that note, does anybody else want to make any comments? I am going to support you here today, and I'm going to vote in favor of the ask, but I really need us to work hard to find more sustainable funding. So Councillor Hollingsworth and Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you. Dr. Dides, you and I have talked for many times and many years on this. And I was really happy to be part of this when it first started approximately years ago. And I remember your passion and your small team at that time, and I'm waving to a few people. And I remember you made all those phone calls to get the first number of bugs and to make sure you had the right food source. And I remember it was a cold winter and you're worried that the bugs were going to pass away. Your passion is huge, and your whole team has the same amount of passion as yourself. And I also enjoy that you have reached out to different parts of the community. And you've also reached out beyond our community. And I know that you have traveled throughout Northern Ontario to promote Atomica, to help those smaller communities like Blind River and so forth, to have a little bit of science in their own classrooms. So thank you for doing that. And you have dedicated a lot of your own personal time, along with your whole team, your own personal time, to make sure that this was going to happen, and children and adults and seniors are enjoying science. So I thank you for that. But I do want to emphasize, please work on getting that charitable number. You get that charitable number, and many more doors are going to be opening. And my colleague to my one to right, who also has charity experience, and myself running a charity, we're here to help you. And once you get that charitable status, I think that if we had some brainstorming with you for like an hour or 2 hours, we could probably open some more doors for you. What you're doing is definitely healthy for our community, healthy for Northern Ontario. So we look forward to celebrating with you. When you get that charity status, get it right away. And the last thing I just want to emphasize is I'm glad to see that the business plan is part of this tonight, because sticking with that plan, you may have to tweak it. But we're here for you. But as our mayor said, we enjoy what you're doing. You're educating our children. You're educating our community. Keep up the good work. But we also have to be very conscious of the future. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so Councilor Shoemaker, and then we'll vote.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Captured a lot of my thoughts on this. I do think that the funding from the EDF makes sense. The Atomica has laid out a great reason why this transitional funding is needed. But, you know, I think I was alluding to in my questions, and you said it fairly bluntly, Mr. Mayor, the municipality has pretty limited funds to fund things on a year-over-year basis, and especially when organizations like our museum are advising us, and our art gallery are advising us that they are underfunded to the standards that they require to maintain their service, and they are really core municipal services. So while I believe Atomica is great and will support this request, I do think that any annual request year over year would be much more difficult to support, especially given our circumstances with our outside agencies that we're currently funding, which as I mentioned, are being funded at levels that are unsustainable for those operations. So glad that Mr. Ver drafted a lengthy and reasonable report here based on Atomica's request, and happy to support it today with I think the same proviso that the mayor indicated, which is that support today doesn't necessarily guarantee support tomorrow, but hopefully this helps you get to where you need to be.
With all due respect, thank you, Your Worship, and City Councils. I mean, we haven't sat and rested on our laurels. We have attempted to go out and meet with various MPPs and to look for funding. It's not as easy as or readily available as one might think. We're going to look at changing our price points and developing a business plan and seeing where we can go, but it's a lot more challenging. And I just want to say as well, I mean, thank you for your incredible support, and thank you for an amazing team and volunteers. And in 4 months alone, we've reached out to over 3,000 students in Hornpain and Chapleau and all over the place. So some of the grant proposals that we're looking at to expand would be to encompass more Northern Ontario communities and hopefully, gain funding that way Like I said, I don't think these provincial funding sources are as readily available as people might think.
I don't think we're meaning to suggest to you they're readily available. We recognize that's a problem.
Yeah, it's a problem. It's
Yeah.
a problem, and you know, when I look at the impact that Atomica has had in our community and further outreaching communities, I think that it's worth saving or worth fighting for. I just need to find some help somehow to find out how we can make it a little more sustainable in the future.
Well, we'll work on that together.
Okay.
In the meantime, I think you're likely going to get the resources you're looking for to keep on going here. So we can call the vote. All in favor? It's carried unanimously.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, folks.
Have a good night.
Thank you for your patience and your white jackets. So, Madam Clerk, that brings us to the consent agenda, I believe.
Yes.
Council, we're on the consent agenda. Do any councillors have matters on the consent agenda they would like to canvass? Councillor Bruni.
The letter that we received.
From the Conservation Authority?
Yeah, and I just want to speak on behalf of the Conservation Authority, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah?
On the consent
Okay.
agenda, you go ahead.
Thank you very much. I just want to recognize Councillor Nero, Councillor Hilsinger, Councillor Gardy from the Sioux here, and Councillor Palumbo from Prince Township. Many of you have received emails from the ministry, but just to let you know, due to the funding reductions, over 48% of the reduction in the province's portion of the flood, erosion, and operations and natural hazard funding earlier this year. So the Conservation Authority was in a bind. We had to make some serious and hard decisions. So we went, well, basically, we've all agreed to eliminate one full-time position, one full-time position reduced to a part-time, and an additional full-time reduced to seasonal. So our staff was at 8, and now our staff is down to 6.5. Also, it does not reflect the seasonal employees who helped the Conservation Authority during the summer. They were not hired back this year. The Conservation Authority is asking for the same budget as 2019 for 2020. Hopefully, the councillors will approve this at budget time. The one program that was canceled, it was the Children's Environmental Education Program. Due to the funding reduction, the program was run through self-generated revenue as well as private donations, but this money is now reallocated towards the flood erosion operations and natural hazard programs. I believe we have made all the financial responsibility reductions that we were able, and we are working solely on core mandated programs, which includes flood erosion, control, maintenance, hazard management, and drinking water source protection. So I just wanted basically to make sure the council and the viewers know the Conservation Authority has been reduced by the provincial government, and hopefully we do not come back to council for additional funding. But hopefully the 2009, our budget is approved for the 2020. Thanks.
Councillor Shoemaker, you wanted to speak to the same matter?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just on Councillor Bruni's point and Ms. Barrett's letter, I don't see Ms. Barrett here, but I think this is a very responsible way of the Conservation Authority to deal with their service cuts. They haven't downloaded the cost of the provincial cuts to the municipality, and certainly I appreciate that, and I'm sure the taxpayers of Sault Ste. Marie appreciate that as well. It has resulted in some pain for the organization very clearly, as the letter sets out, and I can appreciate that those were probably tough decisions to make at the board table, but I do appreciate that a reduction in service, a reduction in funding from the provincial government has not automatically meant an increase increase in funding from the municipality. So it's certainly appreciated from this council.
Thank you. Anybody else on 6.1? So just thank you to the city councilors who are on the Conservation Authority and making that effort. We appreciate it. Councilor Bruni, we're on you. Did you have any other matters?
No,
on
I'm
consent?
okay.
No? So we'll go to Councilor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 6.2, the mausoleum
Expansion, phase
expansion.
15.
Yes. I really only had comments on this. No
Sir,
questions.
go ahead and make your comment. If anybody else has a question, it can follow you.
In 2015, the mausoleum expansion, phase 14, was sole sourced at the cost of $74,000. And we revised our purchasing bylaw after that event. And in 2019, I'm happy to see that the competitive process has resulted in the same bidder being the winner of the contract, but at a cost of $20,000 less to the municipality. So I think that this is an example of where competitive bidding, even if it doesn't seem like a lot, $20,000 goes a long way in our budget, and competitive biddings resulted in better prices for the municipality.
Anybody else on 6.2? Seeing none, did you have any other matters, Councilor Shoemaker?
I did. 6.5, the GFL luxury suite expansion.
Go ahead.
Through you to Mr. Lamming. Mr. Lamming, there was a price tag here for the full expansion of phase 2 and 3, which was about, was it 5 million? Yes. And there are, how many people on the waiting list? It's in the report, but is it 13?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Shoemaker, yeah, including inflation, drawings, and building, it's actually about 6.4 million in the payback calculation in the chart.
And so how many people on the waiting list?
We have 30 different types of businesses and individuals are on the waiting list, and 20 would be willing to purchase a suite.
And so was there thought given to increasing the price of the suite to cover off more of the capital cost?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Shoemaker, there was thought given to that. That would reduce the payback somewhat, but being that it's 30 years right now and the price tag of 6.4 million and prioritizing our projects that we have within the Community Services Division right now, it would take quite a substantial increase to lower that payback to a reasonable time frame.
What about, so there's phase 2 and phase 3 expansion you talk about, which is obviously phase 3 is the maximum number of suites we could get. If there were just a phase 2 expansion, what kind of payback or cost, capital cost are we looking at in that situation?
If we're looking at roughly, we're looking at 13 suites for the one phase and 11 for the other. So even if you're half, you're looking at about half the cost of the 6.4 million, and then your payback would come down accordingly, approximately 15 to 20 years.
And then if you combine that with an increase in the cost of the suite, it would bring that payback down, presumably, right?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Shoemaker, you might get down into 12, 13 years around that type of frame. Okay. Still within our normal payback ranges, typically for our capital projects, is around 5 years is the goal we aim for.
And there's some discussion of an impending contract expiry with the Greyhounds. How long had their contract been? How long is this contract that they're currently in?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Shoemaker, the contract expires in 2025-26.
But when was it signed?
I believe I'd have to check reference here, but it was a 10-year agreement that I have here for my lease that's attached.
So if this were something we were interested and we could align it with the re-signing of a new contract, presuming that happens in 2025, we might be able to get the payback within the period of the contract if another 10-year contract signed?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Schumer, yes, with a longer-term contract and knowing that the Sioux Greyhounds would be here for a longer-term frame would mitigate the risk of the exposure, with it now only being 7 years out or so, or 6 years, I should say, that puts the more in an exposed position.
Right, okay. Obviously, I think the option to convert the boardroom and the office into box office or box seating makes total sense. I'll support that at budget. We'll get to that when we get to it. But I appreciate that those two options are there. So thank you, Mr. Lamb.
Anybody else on that item? Councillor Gardy.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Lamming. Just so I'm understanding this correctly, the boardroom you had mentioned in the report was offered to those who were on the current wait list for the 2018-2019 season if they wanted to utilize it, correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy, yes, it was offered through the season, and it was also offered through the playoffs. The challenge with this current state of the boardroom is the windows that are there right now. Also, with respect to the ledging and seating, it doesn't give an ample experience. So the thought process is to have the windows being able to be moved, a better ledge, higher seating in the back, and with the removal of the wall, you'd be able to have 10 individuals seated around the facility, plus a potential 10 or more that could potentially be inside the space.
Okay, so that's part of option 2 that's being recommended, correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy, that's correct. And to go back to Mr. Shoemaker, it is a 20-year agreement, just to confirm originally it took place.
Okay, just as I kind of read the report, I'm glad you clarified, because I see option 2 is kind of entitled and is referred to within the report as converting the GFL boardroom and office space into a private lounge, and then the other option 3 is converting the GFL boardroom into a private lounge for viewing. So I wasn't sure if option 2 had a viewing option. So I'm glad to understand that it does. That's pretty much it. Thank you.
Anybody else in 6.2? Councillor Vezoal.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Lamming, of those 20 individuals or businesses that are willing to purchase a box, what process do they have to go through so that we have a guarantee for their interest? Like, is there a contract, deposits, that sort of thing?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bezo Allen, there's 2 types of agreements we have right now. We have half that expire in 2021 and half that expire in 2025, 2026. When we first went out to have interest with respect to the phase 2, there were deposits that were obtained, and then when it was cut as a part of the process of the 2006 build, the deposits were returned back. So if that was something that were to happen, we would again proceed with deposits to try to protect the interest of the investment, and that's the process that would be taken.
And Mr. Lamming, of the current boxes that are in the GFL, do they own them indefinitely? Is there a contract period? What is their terms with the current ones?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bezo, yeah, half of them expire in 2021 and half of them expire in 2025, 2026. So we will be looking at that to be renewed with the parties for half of them coming up shortly and then half when the ground contract expires.
Of those ones that are expiring in 2021, do you have a sense of who's going to renew, or do you feel that some may drop off, or do you have any inclination either way?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bezo, from inclination of just talking to staff, the intent would be, I would think that most of them would renew, and we do have a healthy waiting list of 30, and of them, 20, as stated, would be willing to purchase a box. So we're a pretty good spot from a risk management perspective to having those rented.
And with the going into the next phases of boxes, I noticed with the other 2 options with converting boardrooms that there's no viewing if there's a concert. Would there be viewing if there's a concert with the installing more boxes?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bezo, as it stands for concerts per se, if it's a rock concert, a lot of time the stage is positioned in the south end or are moved up. Yep. There are other shows that are out there that are set up for it, conducive that it could be rented. So it's strictly those types of shows that have a stage that would be set deep into the south end. So, but there are other events that are open. Potentially an example would be the figure skating show that's coming up where you could utilize that space.
Thank you, Mr. Lamming.
Anybody else on that matter? Seeing none, Councillor Shoemaker, is that it for you?
Nope. The one about the trails, the mountain bike trails.
That's not on consent.
Oh, sorry. Then 6.6 is Northern Community Center.
Northern Community Center twin pad expansion.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ver. There's mention in your report that the change in the building bid process is not expected to delay the timeframes for the project. Could you just remind council of what those timeframes are?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, when we originally went out with construction management, we were hoping to close in this time period with a recommendation, and then we would work with the proponent who was chosen to then issue an RFP for architecture and engineering services. So we do hope to issue that RFP in the coming weeks, and then we'll probably have a 4-week period. So we'll be back to council in a month and a half, 2 months time frame with a recommendation for the results of that RFP.
Okay, thank you. So we're basically at the same spot we would have been had we picked a construction management firm.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, that's correct.
And so if we're not going with a construction management firm, is the balance of this building, is the expectation that it'll be built in the same way that the first phase, the soccer fields were built, that they were a design-build process?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, that's correct. We'll have the architect and engineering firm create the design, we'll put that out for bid, and then we'll come back with that recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ver.
On the same matter? Go ahead, Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question to Mr. Ver regarding this, which I'm in favor of the twin pad. But I remember before I became a councillor, there was talk that possibly another indoor soccer field would be built or added on, so the 3 fields would be able to be converted into one official-size soccer field. Any consideration on that with the committee?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, we did look at that before we came back with the recommendation. And what we found from the soccer groups is there wasn't the demand for that additional field at this time to justify the investment in expanding that to a 3rd pitch.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so anybody else in 6.6? Are you finished, Councillor Shoemaker? If you are, I'm going to go to Councillor Scott. We'll give him a chance. Councillor Scott?
6.11, the citywide change to garbage or recycling day. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to, I believe this would be for Ms. Hamilton Beach. Could you kind of walk me through the process of, sorry, I've just heard a lot of feedback on this, and most of the people angry, obviously. That's how it comes. But could you just walk me through the process of why we would decide on this particular solution? I did some research. I looked at some other municipalities, and they came up with different ideas, maybe every 2 weeks for each item. So picking up garbage every 2 weeks, and in the in-between weeks doing recycling. And I just kind of wanted to know if, like, what kind of stats we have on our collection, on historically any changes we've made, if that's reduced the amount of recycling that was put out or anything of that matter. And just kind of the process of how we came to this solution.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Scott. At this point in time, the 2 main problems we're trying to address would be space issues due to winter weather, as well, and particularly in our collectors and our downtown core. Many busy streets may find this as an issue, and as well to serve the multifamily sector that is in fact having a multitude of carts to put out. So this is deemed as a solution. Some of the options that you spoke to, I think there's no cookie cutter model to this. You will look at every community and every place has a different solution. Most often, the trigger for a bi-weekly cycle is the implementation of an organics waste program. So if you're pulling those organics out of the waste cycle, it's quite easy and it makes perfect sense to in fact go on a bi-weekly garbage collection. And we look forward potentially to that change in the future. The potential regulations are on the board that we would be looking at about 2025 to having to follow the regulation and in fact put that in place. At this point in time, we are not there.
So the plan for this then, if we go forward with it, would be to, let's say if I missed my Friday waste collection, that's it, that's too bad. Like if I put my recycling on Friday instead of the Monday, I'd have to wait another week to pick up my garbage, right? That's it? There's no, even during the transition, there's no plan for any sort of makeup?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Scott, as is with the current system, if you miss your collection day, your option is certainly to take it to the landfill, but there's no return the following day. You're looking at a different collection vehicle entirely.
Great. Thank you. That was all the questions I have on that matter.
On that same matter, so everybody's putting their hand up on that same matter, so we'll go to Councilor Nero first and then back around.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to confirm, Ms. Hamilton Beach, that this is commencing in November, but this is not a winter schedule. This is year-round?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero, we would look at making this change permanently. We will monitor, obviously, to see that there's not huge consequence to recycling, but this would be a permanent change to the recycling schedule.
Okay, good enough. Thank you. That's my question.
Okay, so that brings us to Councilor Bruni.
To Ms. Hamilton Beach, do you fear that the recycling program could be reduced because people might not want to bring their bin out for the second time? Well, there's 2 bins, so the garbage will definitely go out, but the recycling bin might not be rolled down the driveway. Is there fear of that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni. We're going to launch a quite concentrated campaign to educate the public as to the importance of recycling. The level of inconvenience, if you'd like to word that for the one night when you're putting your garbage out, obviously your effort is cut in half. So we certainly hope the responsible citizens of Sault Ste. Marie would continue to recycle as we do have a very effective program, and we hope to keep collection at the same rate.
And my last question, the change of schedule to separate them in 2 different days, is it because of certain areas of the city, or is it, like, what was the concern here that was brought forward?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bruni. As I said earlier, certainly arterials and collector roads with a heavier volume of traffic and perhaps the narrower driveways, which quite honestly is spread throughout the community, as well as multifamily residents are as well spread throughout the community. So it may affect all wards, perhaps the downtown core a bit more in this case.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
So then we have Councilor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Ms. Hamilton Beach. So if we went with this, is there going to be any additional costs that we should be aware of?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, there are no additional costs associated with this.
Okay, because you're just using the same trucks so far. Okay. Up to this point, I've been getting a lot of emails saying do not change the current system, the current process. But you're now saying that throughout the city, you're receiving a lot of concerns that people are struggling with the size of their driveway. I mean, is it, like you said, is it single housing? Can you just repeat what you just said? Is it apartment buildings? Like, I mean, how widespread is this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. I'm not going to say at this point in time with the summer season that we're receiving these complaints. It's definitely a concern that can be foreshadowed and has been spoken to with people, certainly with narrower driveways, on roadways of heavier traffic volumes, and certainly the multifamily sector.
Okay, and one last question, just to clarify, I think you just mentioned to my councillor, but so this is going to be a permanent change, or is this going to be a pilot for 1 year?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, it will be monitored, but we're looking to enact it as a permanent change.
Okay. So if we vote on this consent agenda tonight, then this will be accepted, is that correct?
Yeah, if you'd like to vote against it, we'd have to pull it from consent.
Okay, can we just pull it from consent?
We can. So, Madam Clerk, we can pull this one from consent.
Thank you.
We had Councilor Hilsinger who wanted to speak to it, so we'll let her speak to it before we pull it off, but we'll vote on it separately, Councilor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question, well, we've all had a lot of calls and emails with people being concerned about this change. One of the concerns is now I have to ensure 2 separate mornings that my refuse or my recycling my driveway is clear enough for me to put the container there. So not just 1 day, but now 2 days, of course, referring to the winter time. Do you have any comments on that? Or I'm sure you have empathy for people on this particular matter, but has there been some discussion about how we could help?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hilsinger. The amount of space that is required in your driveway clearing, I would suggest in most situations is daily. And the amount of space that would be in fact required in some of these situations, if we're looking at the downtown core, they in fact access their buildings from, for instance, in a laneway and would not be clearing at any location on their pickup point prior to now. So it's an extraordinary level of service or requirements on some, and yet I think it's in fact the regular level of clearing your driveway at all points in time.
I'm not sure about that. I think the issue is it's the time of the day. So the driveway has to be cleared by the 7 a.m. time to have the bin out there, not at 7:30 or 8 or 9 or whenever somebody might get around to doing it that particular day. So there seems to be a lot of concern. Thank you.
Anybody else on that issue? Councillor Vezo-Allen.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's not a question, it's just a comment just to clarify. This really affects both Councillor Dufour's in my ward, probably more so than others, and I've only received one email complaint and actually quite a few emails thanking that this was going to happen, because we are dealing with older neighborhoods where you don't have the large suburban driveways, a lot of non-driveways, especially with people along Albert and Wellington. So that has always been a concern. So I just want to clarify that I've only received one email complaint, 0 phone calls, and the rest of the emails have been in support of this initiative. So I want to thank Ms. Hamilton Beach, because this has been a conversation that Councillor Dufour and I have had with Public Works in our particular ward. So thank you.
Okay. Is that it for 611? 611's been pulled, so we'll vote on that separately. Councillor Scott, Councillor Gardy, you're next on my consent list here. Do you have any matters on the consent agenda?
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Council? Councillor Dufour.
Item 6.10, I just had a quick comment, if that's okay, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, it is.
This item deals with the transfer of property to the DSAB, and I believe this is one of the first properties that's been transferred under a relatively new program to see unsold tax sale properties go towards our social housing inventory. And I just wanted to thank staff for their good work on this file. I think that it's a really impressive thing we're doing here in making sure that we are taking care of some of these older neighborhoods that are struggling with blight and with decreased housing opportunities. And so I'm very, very happy to see the work that staff's done, especially for Ward 2. So thank you very much.
Any other matters on consent? Councillor Shoemaker.
Only because I see the folks from the canal sitting here. 6.9, the canal agreement, extension of the canal agreement. Just wanted to thank the folks from Parks Canada, sorry, who are here for their partnership on our canal, on our Soo Lock. I think it's something that is very unique to our city. You know, we may not think of it as such because there's another one right across the river, but you know, globally, not everybody has the great luxury of having a canal, you know, in their downtown area, and it's a great tourist attraction. It's a great service to our residents who boat on both lakes, and it's great to have it, and it's great to have them as partners.
Anything else in consent, Council? Before we move off, I just want to thank staff for 6.12, performance bonds and letters of credit, trying to make you know, our development community as successful as possible, and appreciate the work staff putting into considering this issue. With that noted, we pulled 611, so the consent motion is in front of us. I'll have Madam Clerk read it, and you can vote on it.
A motion by Councillors Gardy and Vezo-Allen, resolved that all the items listed under date September 9, 2019, agenda item 6, consent agenda save and accept agenda item 6.11 be approved as recommended.
All in favor? Carried. So to the fine folks here from the canal, Parks Canada, sometimes when your issue isn't discussed at length, that's a good thing. So you might not have realized it, but it just passed. Okay. So we're at 611 then. Do we need to discuss this matter more, or was it just a matter of pulling it for, everybody's had a say on it now. It's a matter of pulling it for the vote, I imagine. Yeah. You've spoken to it twice now, though, Councillor Hollingsworth, so just make it brief, please.
Questions, not comments.
Yeah.
Again, I just want to say to the staff, to Susan Hamilton Beach and her team, thank you for bringing a solution. You recognize that there was a real challenge in our community, and you worked with your team to try to find a solution. So thank you. It's always, we always appreciate that you're doing this. I just want to emphasize that our ward, my ward, is a lot of senior citizens, and they do struggle taking out their bins just for their garbage day. And now they're going to have to take it out twice a day, and we do have an aging population. So as we vote on this, I just want to emphasize, it's not just the seniors, it's a lot of single moms, but there's a lot of independent people that have some challenges that have to rely on their neighbors or others, and sometimes they can't. So I just want to keep that in mind, that it's not so easy to bring these down on 2 different days. Thank you.
So we have a desire to comment on this now, I think, at length, since it's a separate vote. So we'll go to Councilor Bruni.
I guess I'm a bit confused because I thought this was citywide, but.
It is citywide.
Well, hang on here. 2 councillors from Ward 2 brought it forward because their constituents had concerns with it, which is fine. And,
I don't think they did.
well, Mr. Mayor, let me speak, and we'll go from there.
But I don't think that this was an initiative. No, that needs to be clear. We're talking to the public here. I don't think this was a Ward 2 councillor initiative.
Well, according to
I don't.
Ms. Allen, she said that she brought it forward.
So I think, well, we'll let Public Works address that. Was this something that was brought forward by 2 city councillors?
Councillor Bruni, it was not brought forward in any formal fashion at all through the course of addressing concerns for residents across the city.
Okay, but it was stated, did I hear wrong?
Councillor Rezoning communicated that it was something that she thinks is well received in Ward 2, but I didn't take her to say she initiated it.
Well,
we'll get to Councillor Dufour in a second. If you can finish your comments on it.
No, I'm just saying, if this is a ward issue, and I've received many remarks regarding they're not going to use the recycling bin, they're just going to bring out their garbage once a week and that's it. That's my concern. People are accustomed now to bring the bin out, both bins out in the same evening or same morning. But what I've received, people are going to not use the recycling bin, and they would prefer to have both bins out on the same morning or the same night. But that's...
Okay, so we have Councillor... Did you have your hand up, Councillor Nero, too? I did. Councillor Shoemaker.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think this is a responsible thing to do. We're city councillors, and it does affect Ward 2 probably, and parts of Ward 1 more than it affects my ward. I've had a lot of emails from folks in my ward saying that they don't support this change, and I respect that, but we have a responsibility to the community as a whole to make the best decision for the whole community. And I think that keeping the system the way it is isn't going to work for a big chunk of the community. And so it's our responsibility to find a solution. I think Public Works has come up with a solution here, and maybe some of my residents won't like it, and that is unfortunate. There's never going to be a solution that pleases everybody, but I think this is the least inconvenient solution for all people, because the alternative is a system that just doesn't work for a big chunk of the city. So I support it, and I think it's the responsible thing to do.
Councillor Gardy.
I concur with Councillor Shoemaker, just in that, if people want to speak about contact that was made with them or councillors through the public, when the bins first came out, the concerns that I got was there's not going to be room in the winter. That's all I heard about, whether it was in person or by email or over the phone. I was happy to see that there was a remedy for it. I appreciate some people are going to be challenged by it, and some people are going to say that they're going to throw out all their garbage or recycling in the garbage can. Well, I would really hope that more people would be much more responsible than that And, I think it's a good resolution to the issues that were brought forward to me by the new bins. Thanks.
Councilor Dufour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So one thing that I would really like to point out is that when we first went to the automated cart collection system, again, as Councilor Gardy said, the big complaint was there's not going to be any room in the winter. I'm going to have to clear space in the snowbank for this bin. What Public Works has brought forward is a solution that says you only have to clear half the space. So for our hypothetical single mom or senior who's having to clear space for a bin anyways, now they have to clear half as much space for the entire winter. And the cost of that is only a different recycling day. Most people I know, it usually takes a couple weeks to fill up your recycling bin, and you don't have the same concern about rotting organics in your recycling bin as you do in your garbage bin. And so on the balance of that, either we're guaranteeing people of having to do twice as much snow removal, or we're allowing that flexibility in the change of day to just simply roll out another cart instead of clearing snow. And from my experience in Northern Ontario, most people appreciate it when you have less snow for them to clean. So I think that this is a good resolution. And just to speak to Councillor Bruni's concern, the issue was raised with Public Works as part of the tour that we were all invited on to the Public Works building. And when we were asked to give any questions to Public Works staff, that was one of the questions we had, is what's our contingency plan for the winter with 2 carts? And they said, well, we have one coming to council. So thanks.
Councillor Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too share the concerns that Councillor Bruni has. We just instituted the new bins. Every complaint under the sun was given when they came out, so people generally don't like change. So I'm sure that some of this, the complaining we got with, as Councillor Shoemaker pointed out, this big chunk in the city that are opposed to the way we're doing it right now. I don't know what, with all due respect to Councillor Shoemaker, he's very articulate, but I don't know what a big chunk is. When we're making decisions and we have to make them for the community, I'd like to have real numbers. It seems to me if we launched these new recycling bins, we'd at least have a period of time where people could get used to the system and get rid of those knee-jerk reactions where they say, well, I don't like them. I don't like the color. I'm not going to be able to roll them out. It's going to be too hard to move them in the winter. We're not doubling the amount of snow that needs to be removed. The last time I looked, the footprint of one of these recycling bins is slightly larger than the garbage bin I used to use. The bins themselves are slightly larger than the bins I've used before, so I don't know what the drastic change is. The big change is that you can put garbage bags right inside the bin and a machine will pick them up and dump them. I think the prudent thing to do is to run the year, let people have an opportunity to see how it works. I understand that space is limited in the winter, but if you're talking about accommodating these bins, you're talking about a 4-foot square area that you might have to open up to accommodate the bin. I just don't think that, based on the conversations that I've had with people, that warrants making the change. The overwhelming comments that I've received is that we should just remain the way it is, try it, see how it works, and if in fact it's creating hardship, then I think we should change it. We just introduced them, and now we're looking at changing them because we've received complaints. Well, we get complaints about everything. So I think we need a time to vet some of this stuff, give the city a chance to understand how these work, try them, and then in the spring, if we feel that we need to do this and we can come up with some hard numbers as to justify a change, then let's do it.
Any other councillors like to comment on this? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, if we can have the vote, please. All in favor? So opposed? So you got, yeah, so we we've got, who do we have here? Do we have everybody's vote in, Madam Clerk?
Councillor Gardy? I can do it for you manually. Which way?
And Councillor
Hollingsworth?
So I think it passed.
6-5.
Passed 6-5. Okay, so that moves us to 7.3.1.
That's right. Mountain Bike Tourism Product Development Economic Development Fund request. A motion by Councillors Barty and Dufour, resolved that the report of the Deputy CAO Community Development and Enterprise Services dated September 9, 2019 be received as information, and the request for funding for $166,000 from the Economic Development Fund be approved for use for the development of the Algoma Trail Network.
Okay, Council, so Mr. Vera's got a pretty substantive report on there that I thought was pretty clear. We'll take any questions on it and then any comments. We'll start with Councillor Shoemaker, then Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Ver. Mr. Ver, what, if you know, is the general breakdown of trail mileage or trail percentage that are going to be in the city limits versus sort of outside the city limits?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker. I may defer that question, if I can, to Travis Anderson. He's a bit more familiar with the mountain bike trail system.
In his personal capacity, I think. Mr. Anderson, is that the case? Yeah.
That is correct.
But you
yeah.
are participating in supporting this project. You have been in your personal.
Yeah, we've been actively constructing the first series of trails for the Farmer Light network that will tie into this. As it stands right now, we're at a very preliminary stage in terms of the overall development for this next phase of funding. The funding's to support a trail master plan and the construction of additional approximately 100 kilometers worth of new single track. The current system that we're working on right now is all within Conservation Authority land. We're hoping to keep the majority of the trails within city boundaries. And the primary driver of this is to develop sufficient trail network that you're capable of attracting individuals to come to the community and stay for a 2 to 3 day minimum based on the trail network. So the real focus is getting individuals here for a tourism product and then keeping them local. There may be some, much like individuals would do if they went out to Searchmount, some ventures into the Algoma area, but really the core of the product is to keep them into Ste. Marie.
And is the anticipation that there'd be like a trailhead or a launching area somewhere in the Soo?
Yeah, it's currently at Hiawatha Park.
Okay.
So the trail system that we're currently working on connects from Hiawatha into the Connor Road area and then north from there. But we hope to maintain Hiawatha as the primary trailhead.
Okay, no, that's great. And, I can accept and understand that some of these would have to go into the Algoma district. I think that's sensible to create a product that's going to bring enough people in, but I think making sure that the Soo is the hub of the landing area, yeah, exactly, makes lots of sense.
Councillor Bruni.
Shoemaker asked my question, thanks.
Any other councillors for questions? I think this is a tremendous application and opportunity. I think this is great for our community. I think we're really thinking about tourism in the right way, and I think we really should be an epicenter for this type of activity. So it's great work, and I strongly support it. So we have read the motion, Madam Clerk?
I have.
All in favor? Do we have everybody's vote, Madam Clerk?
Councillor Gardy seems to have lost connectivity. How do you?
Yeah, he's in favor. And Councillor Christian, yeah. Councillor Christian's in favor.
And Councillor Hollingsworth?
Very good.
Motion carries. Go to agenda item 8.1, Biggings Avenue Open House. A motion by Councillors Vezo-Allen and Dufour, whereas residents of Biggings Avenue in Ward 2 of Sault Ste. Marie have expressed concerns regarding vehicular traffic and safety on their street. And whereas after consultation with city staff, an open house was recommended. And whereas neighborhood open houses have been a successful model for community engagement, now therefore be it resolved that appropriate staff be requested to hold an open house for the residents of Biggings Avenue under the auspices of a Schedule A+ environmental assessment by the end of October 2019.
Okay, so would you like to speak to this, Councillor Vezo-Allen?
Very briefly, this is from interactions that both Councillor Dufour and I have had with residents on Biggings Avenue concerning community safety in terms of vehicle traffic, school buses not being able to go down the street, as well as what we were just discussing as far as garbage collection and snow removal. So we went to city staff, they recommended an open house, and that's what's being put forth to you this evening.
Anything to add? All in favor? The vote is carried, almost closed, but carried.
Councillor Hollingsworth?
She has her computer, you have your computer closed, I think, eh, Councillor Hollingsworth?
She doesn't have connectivity because she's using my iPad.
Yeah. Gotcha, okay.
Agenda item 8.2, Northern Avenue East Sackville Road intersection, a motion by Councillors Nero and Bruni. Whereas the intersection of Northern Avenue East and Sackville Road is a very busy intersection, and whereas many vehicles, including large trucks, use this intersection to and from their places of business on Second Line and on Sackville Road, and whereas school children must use this intersection on their way to Boreal French Immersion Public School, now therefore be it resolved that Public Works and Engineering staff be requested to conduct a full study of this intersection to determine if the intersection warrants the provision of a school crossing guard and report back to council.
Councillor Nero, would you like to speak to this?
Not really, Mr. Mayor. I think I'll speak to it when the report comes back.
Councillor Bruni?
Go ahead.
Okay, all in favor? Recognizing you're not connected, Councillor Hollingsworth, were you in favor? Yeah, I had my hand. Yeah. I was voting, so my eyes are down.
Councillor Gardy in favor? Okay. Agenda item 8.3, Giving Tuesday, a motion by Councillors Vezo, Allen, and Dufour, whereas Giving Tuesday was established as a national day of giving in 2013 to be held on the Tuesday after Black Friday and Cyber Monday. And whereas Giving Tuesday is a celebration of philanthropy and volunteerism where people contribute what they are able to donate. And whereas Giving Tuesday sees citizens work together to share commitments, rally for favorite causes, build stronger communities, and think about the needs of others. And whereas it is fitting and proper on Giving Tuesday and every day to recognize the tremendous impact of philanthropy, volunteerism, and community service in the city of Sault Ste. Marie, now therefore be it resolved that City Council supports Giving Tuesday and encourages all citizens in Sault Ste. Marie to join together to give back to the community.
Councillor Vezo, Allen, would you like to speak to this?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is very timely due to our conversation with Atomica this evening and sustaining nonprofits. So I urge all charitable organizations in the community to go to givingtuesday.ca. It's on December 3rd, Tuesday, December 3rd. The reason why it's being brought forth now is you need time to prepare and possibly have board approval and resolutions with your own organizations. There's free resources and toolkits. So this is a whole online giving platform where you give for the day. So in 2014, Guelph, Ontario did Guelph Gives. It was one city, one day, 1 million. And in 2014, they raised $1.2 million for local charities in their day. So over 40 communities in Canada participated last year. Sault Ste. Marie will be one of them. There's a free mayor's toolkit. Wanted to let the mayor know that on givingtuesday.ca. So please, please, please have your organizations get familiar with Giving Tuesday. It's something that we can all do together. And then one important stat is 49% of Gen Xers and baby boomers, I'm barely a Gen Xer, I'm almost a baby boomer, but 49% of that demographic give online. And 40% of millennials give online. So please go to givingtuesday.ca and I'll make sure that Mayor Provenzano has access to the Mayor's Toolkit. Thank you very much.
Would anybody else like to speak to that motion? Councillor Dufour. I understand there's a Mayor's Toolkit, so you don't have to speak, you don't have to speak to that in your comments, please.
Well, I'm very glad that you're well aware. No, I just simply wanted to recognize Sarah McCleary at St. Vincent's Place. Last year, we had been having conversations about different things that we could do to raise more funds for the shelter and the food bank and thrift store there. And this was one of the ideas that she brought forward. Unfortunately, we weren't on time enough to get organized for last year, as our council term had just begun. But thankfully, we are this year, and I would encourage everyone in the community to support it. So thank you very much.
Any other comments on that motion? All in favor? Motion is carried.
I will move to bylaws. Motion by Councillors Gardy and Bezo Allen, resolved that all bylaws under item 11 of the agenda under date September 9, 2019 be approved.
Before we vote on that, Councillor Shoemaker's indicating a conflict. Is it in the bylaws, obviously, Councillor Shoemaker?
Yes, it's 11.1.2 Bylaw 2019-162, Old Garden River Road. Sorry, I just caught it. It's a client of my law firm owns the property.
Okay, just give me a second.
So we'll accept that from the vote we're currently taking. So all in favor? Motion's carried. So now we have to vote on the bylaw that Councillor Shoemaker's conflicted on.
Yeah, I just need, sorry, I need to do the consented one. – 11.1.2, right?
Yep.
Okay, I'm opening the consent motion for voting.
Okay, so if you can all vote, please.
That motion carries. And I will open 11.1.2, which is regarding 71 Old Garden River Road. A motion by Councillors Gardy and Bezo Allen, resolved that bylaw 2019-162, being a bylaw to amend Sault Ste. Marie zoning bylaws 2005-150 and 2005-151 concerning lands located at 71 Old Garden River Road, North Shore Sports and Auto Incorporated, be passed in open council this 9th day of September 2019.
Okay, so Councillor Hilsinger is also conflicted on that one. So everybody but Shoemaker and Hilsinger. All in favor? Motion carried.
I'll fix that one after.
You can adjust it after.
Which moves us to
Closed.
closed. Motion by Councillor Scott and Bezo Allen, resolved that this council proceed into closed session to consider one item concerning potential litigation and one item subject to solicitor-client privilege. Further be it resolved that should the said closed session be adjourned, the council may reconvene in closed session to continue to discuss the same matters without the need for a further authorizing resolution.
All in favor? Carried.
And a motion by Councillor Scott and Bezo Allen, resolved that this council shall now adjourn.
All in favor? Carried. See you in closed, folks. Yes, sir.